My CEO wife never in her wildest dreams imagined that this would happen, simply because she posted photos of my brutal punishment online for other people's twisted entertainment. She returned home to find the house completely wiped clean of any trace of my existence. The absolute only thing left was a single piece of paper sitting on the living room table. Seraphina, I will never see you again. Staring at those few words, her hands started to tremble uncontrollably. What she didn't know was that while she was out on her little romantic rendezvous with Lysander, I had already boarded a private jet arranged by my real, biological parents and gone home. 3 years ago, Seraphina's parents passed away in a horrific car accident. Afterward, Seraphina found a specific text message on their phone. I want to eat the plum cakes from the north side of town. But here is the massive plot twist. I wasn't the one who sent that text. No matter how much I tried to explain myself, Seraphina refused to believe a single word. She stubbornly forced me to atone for her parents' deaths. I was violently trembling, kneeling in the freezing snow, writing, "I am guilty," over and over again, like a completely broken human typewriter. It was just so unbelievably cold, and I was wearing practically nothing. My vision suddenly went pitch black, and I collapsed hard onto the freezing ground. In my delirium, my mind flashed back to our past. Back then, Seraphina would hold a bouquet of flowers standing in the pouring rain just to pick me up. She would literally lose a whole night's sleep over a single, casual sentence of mine, and then, the memory violently shifted to Seraphina's red, swollen eyes glaring at me. "Caspian, I want you to atone for their deaths." Through day after day of absolutely relentless torment, I suddenly understood something profound. Perhaps Seraphina didn't actually disbelieve me. She just desperately needed a convenient scapegoat to take the total blame for her parents' tragic car crash. She badly needed an excuse to vent all of her explosive emotions. And, congratulations to me, I was the chosen excuse. When I finally opened my eyes again, I was lying in our marital bedroom. Seraphina was sitting right next to me, looking at me with an incredibly complicated expression. Her hand reached out, seemingly wanting to gently touch my face. I could see a brief flicker of pity in her eyes. Seeing her there, I subconsciously opened my mouth. "I didn't do it. I didn't send that text." Instantly, she violently yanked me up, dragging me straight toward the dark, solitary confinement room. 3 years, she snarled viciously. "And you are still so stubbornly unrepentant." I completely broke down and cried out, "Seraphina, you will absolutely regret this." My only answer was the loud crash of the confinement room's heavy metal door being forcefully kicked open. I was thrown inside roughly like a worthless sack of potatoes, my forehead smashing violently against the sharp corner of the table. I nervously reached up to touch the wound. Sure enough, I was leaking premium, organic red fluid everywhere. In the past, even if I just got a tiny little paper cut on my finger, Seraphina would heartbrokenly hug me and rush me straight to the hospital, even though the wound would have healed itself if she had just waited 30 seconds. Now, my forehead was injured severely enough to leave an ugly, permanent scar. Yet, Seraphina acted as if she was completely blind to it. She carelessly tossed a calligraphy brush and some thin rice paper inside the room. "Copy I am guilty 10,000 times. If you can't finish, don't even bother coming out." The exact moment the heavy door slammed shut, I heard a familiar voice echoing from the outside. "Sister, why are you losing your temper like this? Did brother-in-law mess up again?" It was Lysander, playing his signature innocent victim card. Seraphina coldly retorted, "There is no brother-in-law here. Only a sinner." Hearing that, I hooked my lips into a pathetic, self-deprecating smile. I fumbled around in the absolute pitch darkness and eventually found the paper and the brush, but I didn't actually start writing. Why? Because Seraphina, in all her infinite wisdom, didn't bother to bring me any ink. If I wanted to write, I had to use my very own blood. After pausing for a few long minutes, I grimly dipped the brush into the warm blood on my body. Seraphina was always a woman of her word. If these severe injuries of mine weren't treated soon, I would genuinely bleed out, and I definitely didn't want to kick the bucket just yet. I still hadn't found out who really sent that fake text message back then, nor had I located the whereabouts of my old childhood orphanage. I absolutely couldn't just casually give up on my own life like this. Unable to see a single thing in the dark room, the sticky blood from my head wound eventually dried up entirely. I had absolutely no idea how many times I had actually copied that miserable phrase. With stiff, freezing cold hands, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and carefully pressed the screen to check the time. It was already 7 p.m. But before I could even put the phone back down, the door to the confinement room suddenly swung violently open. A blindingly harsh light pierced right into my eyes, making it completely impossible to keep them open. Lysander was obnoxiously waving a bright flashlight back and forth right in my damn face. Sister asked me to come and see exactly how your writing is going. How can you possibly face our adoptive parents by writing absolute garbage like this? Rewrite it. With a wicked smirk, Lysander pulled out a metal lighter and set the few bloody pages I had managed to write completely ablaze. Soon enough, my literal blood, sweat, and painful tears turned into gray ashes gently fluttering to the cold floor. I was utterly weak, desperately wanting to stop him, but realizing my legs had completely forgotten how to stand up. I could only watch helplessly as that bastard Lysander entirely incinerated my hard work. Lysander threw me a disgusting, mocking glance, then immediately turned around and threw himself right into the comforting arms of Seraphina, who had just come downstairs. Sister, he actually didn't write a single page. He has absolutely no remorse at all. Seraphina's face instantly turned incredibly icy. She used the ambient light from the hallway to glance inside the dark room, and sure enough, she saw absolutely no trace of writing on the blank rice paper. I subconsciously tried to defend myself. I did write it. Lying again. Seraphina angrily interrupted me without a single shred of trust. Caspian, I am truly disappointed in you. Sister. Lysander's pathetic voice elegantly interrupted her train of thought. He even managed to squeeze out a fake crocodile tear from the corner of his eye. The hospital just called me. They still haven't found a suitable kidney donor for my condition. Could you maybe ask brother-in-law to go do a matching test? Normally, Seraphina would have immediately rejected this utterly ridiculous request. But today, I had been far too disobedient for her liking. She clearly wanted to teach me a harsh lesson. It's just a matching test, she reasoned in her head. It's not actually guaranteed to be a success. Anyway, Seraphina slowly walked toward me, her cold gaze sweeping over my pale, bruised cheeks, and she spoke in a chilling tone that bordered on purely vindictive. Being alive still has its uses. You can go do a kidney match for Lysander. In my ear, I could clearly hear Lysander's intermittent, incredibly fake crying voice. Sister, you know I have a very serious kidney disease. If we don't find a donor quickly. Hearing that, Seraphina hesitated no longer. She violently grabbed me by the collar and practically tossed me straight into the back of her car. Lysander's birth parents had died very early on while heroically saving Seraphina. Right after that tragic incident, Seraphina officially adopted the 10-year-old Lysander. Following her very own parents' devastating deaths, she treated him as the absolute only family she had left in this massive world. She simply could not tolerate the terrifying thought of letting her final remaining relative leave her too. Upon finally arriving at the busy hospital, Seraphina ruthlessly tossed me over to the doctor. Check if his kidney is a match for Lysander. The corrupt doctor and Lysander exchanged a highly suspicious, knowing look, completely ignoring me. I was just the miserable guy who currently resembled a battered extra from a low-budget zombie movie. Massive blood loss had made my already pale face look as freezing cold and devoid of life as a fresh human corpse. I simply couldn't hold on any longer. I passed out completely. When I groggily woke up from my forced, painful nap, I heard two people quietly gossiping about me. He looked so much like them. Could he really be the long-lost son of that wealthy family? Lysander's menacing, icy voice immediately followed. He is just a pathetic piece of trash the Liu family threw away. You better mind your own damn business. He paused for a second, then sadistically added, take the positive kidney matching report directly to my sister. I want to make absolutely sure that Caspian never wakes up on that operating table. Soon after, the door was quietly pushed open. Both the shady doctor and Lysander left the room. When I fully opened my heavy eyes, I only saw Seraphina standing silently at the doorway. She uncomfortably shifted her gaze away from mine. Lysander's illness. It can't be delayed any longer. You can live perfectly fine with just one single kidney. Hearing her cold words, I hooked my lips into a deeply cynical smile. And what if I told you, Lysander fully intends for me to permanently go to sleep on that operating table? My throbbing head was violently splitting with pain, but the chilling conversation between Lysander and the doctor kept echoing loudly in my mind. Who was that mysterious family he had mentioned? Was it my true, biological parents' family? If it really was, I could finally leave this abusive nightmare with Seraphina and return to the warm embrace of my real parents. But right before that could happen, I absolutely could not let this twisted kidney donation surgery proceed smoothly. As I spoke, My tired eyes inadvertently betrayed a deep, desperate longing for actual freedom. Seeing this, Seraphina just snorted coldly. If you don't want to donate, just say so. Don't go inventing wild excuses to slander Lysander. Caspian, how could you be so utterly immature? She then casually pulled a check out of her designer suit pocket. This $1 million is the payment to buy your kidney. This price is way above the current market rate. I let out a broken, desolate laugh. So, this was it. My legally wedded wife was literally treating my internal organs like a cheap clearance sale at a local butcher shop. I slowly took the check, and right under Seraphina's freezing glare, I ripped it into a million tiny confetti pieces. Seraphina's perfect mask of indifference finally cracked. She spoke with a dark, threatening tone. Don't reject a face-saving offer. You owe my family 2 lives. What's the big deal about donating 1 little kidney? I was just about to logically argue back, when a loud knock suddenly sounded on the hospital door. Her assistant carefully pushed the door open. President, the plum cakes you asked me to buy have finally arrived. I stared at the pastry packaging box in absolute utter disbelief. Ever since Seraphina's parents got into that fatal car crash 3 years ago, I hadn't touched a single plum cake. My own wife framed me, declaring this was the ultimate proof of my supposed crime. I wasn't the one who sent that fatal text message, I argued, my voice cracking with desperate defiance. Surprisingly, Seraphina didn't explode into her usual blinding rage. Instead, she let out a cold, hollow scoff, taking the delicate plum cake I had just bought and tossing it straight into the garbage. Her icy gaze locked onto mine, swirling with a dark, twisted emotion I couldn't even begin to decipher. Caspian, she whispered. For the first time in 3 long years, she actually used my sweet, old nickname from back when we were still madly in love. I wish, more than anyone else on this earth, that text message never existed. Just then, the television in my dreary hospital room cut to a live talk show. The upbeat host was interviewing none other than the on-screen version of my wife, Seraphina. Miss Seraphina, you single-handedly rebuilt your family's massive empire at such a young age, and you even married your childhood sweetheart. I have to ask, does a powerful woman like you have any regrets? On the screen, Seraphina's brow twitched before she masked it with a flawless, practiced smile. Live on television, she pulled out her phone, dialed my exact number, and then ruthlessly hung up right before I could even say hello. No, her televised voice echoed without a single ounce of hesitation. I have absolutely 0 regrets. The real-life Seraphina, standing right in front of me, heard the broadcast too. Annoyance flashed across her face as she violently snatched the remote and killed the screen. Then, in a bizarre twist, she bent down, dug the crushed plum cakes out of the trash, ripped open the box, and shoved them toward me. Eat up, Caspian. You are definitely not my regret, and you never, ever will be. After dropping that chilling line, her face completely froze over, shifting right back into her ruthless, emotionally dead CEO persona. She snatched a medical consent form and a heavy fountain pen right out of her assistant's trembling hands. As your legal wife, I will be signing this kidney donation form on your behalf. My blood ran cold, and my pupils instantly shrank to the size of absolute pinholes. I lunged forward like a cornered beast, desperately trying to rip that nightmare of a document from her grip. But in the chaotic struggle, I blindly knocked the plum cakes away. The fragile, flower-shaped pastries hit the floor, instantly pulverized beneath the merciless heel of Seraphina's designer stilettos. She stood tall, pinning my wrists down with terrifying, effortless strength. Calm down. Just consider this kidney as paying back the life you owe my family. As for the rest of your debt, once your slate is wiped completely clean, as those words left her mouth, a deeply unsettling, twisted glint of desire flickered in her dark eyes. You love me way too much, Caspian. You could never bear to actually leave me. When the time is right, we can finally be together properly. No, I screamed, my eyes burning violently red as hot. Bitter tears streamed down my hollow cheeks. Even if that so-called perfect day never comes, I am done. Seraphina, I want a divorce, I roared. But her cold, calculated expression didn't shift a single millimeter. Instead, she reached out and patted my head, treating me exactly like a disobedient golden retriever. Be a good boy now. Stop throwing these little tantrums. After your surgery is over, I'll have the director of your precious old orphanage give you a call. My frantic heartbeat instantly slammed to a halt. That wicked woman was holding the absolute last soft spot in my ruined life hostage. For years, I had zero clue if the sweet people at my childhood orphanage were even okay. I squeezed my eyes shut, my spirit breaking as I choked out a hoarse, utterly defeated whisper. Fine. I'll be good. I won't cause any more trouble. I'll do whatever sick thing you want me to do. Just, please, don't hurt them. Staring down at my totally dead, empty expression, Seraphina suddenly scowled, visibly surging with intense irritation. I have a high-class networking banquet this afternoon. You are coming with me. I forced a weak twitch of my lips. Fine. She quickly handled my hospital discharge papers, and then, in a grand, nauseating display of twisted mercy, she added, I remember you used to love drinking plum wine. I'll have the staff prepare a fresh batch. After all, once they slice you open for the surgery, you won't be allowed to touch a single drop of alcohol ever again. Wow. So she actually knew that a guy missing a whole kidney couldn't live a normal, healthy life. Stealing my vital organ and then letting me binge drink plum wine right before going under the knife? Was this seriously supposed to be her sick version of charity? With no choice left, I was mercilessly dragged to the glittering banquet hall. Sitting in the corner, I aggressively poured glass after glass of wine straight down my burning throat. The plum liquor tasted incredibly sharp and bitter, perfectly mirroring the dense, agonizing betrayal tearing my heart to shreds. She used to care about the foods and drinks I loved. Seraphina once swore on her life she would learn to make all my favorites. Right now, buried under the old plum tree at our grand villa, there was still a dusty jar of plum wine she had lovingly brewed with her own 2 hands. That exact jar was originally meant to be popped open on our magical wedding day. But when we finally tied the knot, we just rushed to the courthouse to sign a cheap piece of paper. Using her period of deep mourning as a convenient excuse, my wife threw zero ceremony and invited absolutely no guests. Like a fool, I just felt profoundly sorry for her. Even though she forced us to sleep in totally separate rooms for years, I never once placed the blame on her. Instead of getting angry, I would secretly cry myself to sleep at night, quietly sneaking into her room just to gently stroke her pale, stressed-out cheeks while she rested. But what the hell did I ever get in return? I got a wife who looked me in the eyes and said she absolutely despised me. She hated me just enough to forcefully butcher an organ right out of my body. Stop drinking right now, Seraphina snapped, viciously grabbing my wrist. You are still recovering from being sick. Chugging alcohol like this is terrible for your health. I was already half-wasted by then. Groggily, I reached out a shaky hand, desperately wanting to touch her face. My sweet Ruya, are you finally back to me? But suddenly, her phone loudly buzzed with a call from that parasite, Lysander. One quick glance at the screen, and she violently jumped up in an absolute panic to answer it. My outstretched hand grasped nothing but cold, empty air, and my hazy mind sobered up in a brutal instant. I stared blankly at her, retreating back, my lips moving in a silent, bitter mock. Childhood sweetheart. What a joke. I honestly thought she was the only woman for me in this entire lifetime. But then the harsh reality hit me. No matter how deeply you love something, consuming too much of its toxicity will only make you violently sick to your stomach. Plum wine? I didn't love that garbage anymore. While my wife was outside obsessing over her precious phone call, an old buddy nearby hesitated awkwardly before finally speaking up. Hey, brother-in-law. Pardon me for being nosy, but how is your actual family doing these days? I slowly shook my heavy head. I don't have one. I'm just an orphan. Instantly, the guy's eyes lit up like a blazing Christmas tree. Wait. The ultra-wealthy Sterling family over in the capital lost a young son years ago. They just found out he was taken in by a local orphanage right here in the northern city. Your age matches up 100% perfectly. Dude, you might actually be the long-lost young master of the billionaire Sterling family. My heart raced. I immediately added him on my messaging app, practically begging him to use his connections to investigate. But listen, please don't let Seraphina catch wind of this yet. If I truly find my real flesh and blood, I want to be the one to break the news to her. After all, she used to desperately want to help me find my roots, and some foolish part of me still didn't want to disappoint her. I wasn't making that up. The old, loving version of my wife was willing to sacrifice absolutely everything just to help me track down my true origins. She used to hold me close and say I was a child blessed by the heavens, and that in some hidden corner of the world, my real family was out there missing me terribly. The sheer agony of that memory crushed me. I grabbed a fresh bottle of hardcore liquor, poured a massive glass, and aggressively downed the whole thing. The fiery, spicy liquid scorched my throat, forcing hot, pathetic tears to stream uncontrollably down my face. My friend awkwardly slid a tissue across the table. Hey, why are you crying, man? Finding your real family is supposed to be a massive win. I didn't even bother giving him an answer. I just kept my dead eyes glued to the grand doorway. Deep down in my gut, I already knew the agonizing truth. Seraphina was never coming back for me. Another painful hour ticked by. The spoiled rich kids running the banquet finally got bored and shouted about switching to a new club. Only then did they suddenly remember I existed, the pathetic loser practically superglued to the dark corner booth. "Hey, brother-in-law, let us give you a ride home first." Seraphina must have gotten caught up with some super urgent business. I forcefully pushed myself up from the seat. "No need, I'll just catch a cab on my own." But the very second those confident words left my mouth, my entire face flushed hot with deeply humiliating embarrassment. "Could one of you guys actually lend me some cash? I, totally forgot my wallet." The friend slowly looked me up and down, taking in my pitiful state, but tactfully kept his mouth shut. He just pulled out his phone and hailed a premium cab for me. The group stuck around, refusing to leave, until they physically watched me buckle safely into the back seat. But right as the heavy car door slammed shut, I could still hear their venomous gossip leaking through the glass. "Dude, before he tied the knot, wasn't that guy supposed to be a top-tier financial genius? Yeah, my own dad aggressively tried to headhunt him for the firm. How the hell did he end up married and completely flat broke, without a single red cent to his damn name?" Their mocking voices quickly faded into the busy street noise as the driver pulled away. I turned my head, staring blankly at my hollow reflection in the tinted window. My glory days dominating the high-stakes corporate world felt so incredibly alien now, almost like they belonged to a completely different lifetime. These very same hands that used to flawlessly manipulate the global stock market were now only good for writing forced confessions of, "I am guilty." Only good for slaving away over a hot stove to prepare 3 meals a day. Only good for scrubbing an obscenely massive villa entirely by myself like a glorified maid. I forced a dark, brutally bitter smile. If this miserable existence was the toll fee for loving a woman like Seraphina, then the asking price was just way too damn steep. In that quiet car, I made a hardened vow, whether the billionaire Sterling family was my real bloodline or not. As soon as I secured the safety of my old orphanage, I was leaving that toxic woman forever. Later, when the cab finally dropped me at our sprawling villa in the quiet northern suburbs, I unlocked the heavy front door only to freeze in absolute, paralyzed shock at the catastrophic mess destroying the living room. Designer clothes were violently thrown all over the expensive hardwood floor, and echoing from our premium living room sofa, I could vividly hear Lysander's disgusting, whiny moans. "Sister, please, be gentle. It hurts," he whimpered. My brain practically short-circuited, exploding with the chaotic force of a blockbuster action movie. They were supposed to be adoptive siblings. How in the hell could they be doing something this depraved? But then came the real killing blow, Seraphina's breathy, overly seductive whisper echoing through the dark room. "Oh, Caspian, if only it were actually you." The sick truth slammed into me. She was literally using Lysander as my twisted physical substitute. I crept closer to the cracked doorway, sucking in a deep, wildly shuddering breath, but I just couldn't scrape together the raw courage to violently kick it open. Sickening, intermittent sounds of their twisted intimacy kept leaking into the hallway. Suddenly, Lysander raised his arrogant voice. "Sister, come on, this isn't exactly our first time. Stop bringing up that useless loser. We are the 2 closest people in the entire world. I'm the only man who truly, deeply loves you. Caspian doesn't care about you at all." Inside, Seraphina's gaze must have turned pitch black. She fiercely bit down on his bare shoulder like a predator. "Shut your mouth. Call me by my real name. Lysander. Thank you for being willing to act as Caspian's stand-in tonight. Honestly, if it weren't for that unforgivable text message, Caspian and I would be the ones tearing up these sheets right now." Lysander dramatically shrank back against the headboard, his pathetic eyes welling up with incredibly fake tears. "But sister, you clearly know he wasn't the one who actually sent that deadly text." I said, "Shut up!" A sharp slap echoed out as Seraphina viciously backhanded him across the face without a single ounce of hesitation. "You are never, ever allowed to bring that secret up again." Standing in the hallway, I completely lost my mind. I couldn't believe my own damn ears. My entire body started shaking with a violent, uncontrollable rage. That text message, the single, cursed text message that had brutally destroyed my life for 3 straight years. Lysander knew the absolute truth behind it. And my wife. Seraphina actually knew I was innocent all along. I frantically ripped my phone out of my pocket, desperate to reread that cursed old text message to see what I had missed. But to my absolute despair, the screen was dead. I snapped my head up in pure panic, my terrified, wide-eyed gaze crashing straight into Seraphina. She had just pushed the bedroom door open, and I stumbled backward in sheer terror. I could accept a lover falling out of love with me over a misunderstanding. But I absolutely could not accept that she spent 3 whole years weaving a fabricated crime, just to forcibly imprison me by her side. Seraphina stood there, completely dumbfounded, reaching her trembling hand out toward me. "Caspian, you heard everything." Lysander smugly linked his arm through Seraphina's, staring right at me, his so-called brother-in-law. "As you can see, we're together now." He pointed a condescending finger at the messy aftermath in the room. "Since you're back, go clean this up." Seraphina didn't even object. Snapping out of her daze, she took 2 steps forward and grabbed my arm like a vice. "That's right, you still have to atone. You haven't finished writing 'I am guilty' 10,000 times. You still owe the Liu family lives. We can't just drop this." My head felt like it was literally splitting open. It was as if a giant, suffocating net was closing in on me from all sides, completely cutting off my oxygen. Running on pure adrenaline, I swung my arm and delivered a resounding, full-force slap right across Seraphina's face. "You knew all along that I didn't send that text message, didn't you?" Seraphina looked at the pure, crushing disappointment in my eyes, and her heart gave a violent lurch. She couldn't lose me, not 3 years ago, and definitely not today. Friend. Forcing herself to calm down, she gripped my wrist like a maniac and started dragging me right back toward the solitary confinement room. Right before the heavy door slammed shut, I only heard her chillingly calm voice. "Caspian, be a good boy. Once you donate your kidney and pay back the life you owe my family, we'll go abroad. We'll live happily ever after." "No," I screamed at the top of my lungs. "I didn't send that text. I don't owe anyone in your twisted family a damn." Ignoring the agonizing pain in my sprained ankle, I ran to the door like an absolute madman, pounding on it with all my might. "Seraphina, you can't do this to me." Outside, Lysander's sickeningly sweet voice chimed in. "Seraphina, I know you didn't want to treat him like this. I know your heart must be suffering right now. It's okay. I understand everything. I forgive him." Lysander had voluntarily taken my place as a stand-in once again, even taking the liberty to forgive Seraphina on my behalf. What a joke. Truly. Employee of the month. My brain throbbed in waves of pure, blinding agony. I clawed desperately at the heavy door lock, leaving bloody scratch marks all over the metal. "Seraphina, let me out! You too can't do this. You can't." My vision blacked out in dark, dizzying waves. The extreme emotional whiplash was the final straw for my already tortured body. I completely passed out, simultaneously spiking a dangerously high fever. When I finally woke up again, I had no earthly idea how much time had passed. I was desperately thirsty and couldn't help but croak out, "Water." A glass of water was swiftly brought to my dry lips. Then, Seraphina's chillingly pragmatic voice echoed through the dim room. "I didn't mean to lock you in the confinement room. I just wanted you to calm down. For your final debt, you can be Lysander's body double. I've already booked a plastic surgeon for you. You'll get your face altered to look exactly like him. Then, you'll go abroad with me and get me pregnant. When I give birth to the child, everyone will just assume it's Lysander's kid." My trembling hand completely knocked over the water glass, shattering it. I stared at the woman in front of me, a deranged monster wearing my wife's face. My hoarse voice carried a heavy trace of undeniable despair. "Why? You know perfectly well I didn't send that text. You also know Lysander isn't even biologically related to the Liu family, so why force me to atone to him, completely alone?" Seraphina just pursed her lips. She calmly crouched down and began picking up the shattered glass pieces, one by one. "Caspian, because I was the one who sent that text. I just wanted my parents to buy me plum cakes on their way back. I couldn't find my phone, so I used yours." A sharp piece of glass sliced right open Seraphina's finger, but she acted as if she couldn't feel a damn thing. "We are husband and wife. We share blessings, and we share burdens. We share sins. Even though Lysander isn't a biological Liu, he is the only truly innocent person left in our family now. Of course, we must atone to him." Seraphina casually tossed the bloody glass shards into the trash can, poured a fresh glass of water, and brought it right back to my lips. "Don't leave the house for the next few days. Once your plastic surgery is complete, we are moving abroad. The Liu family's business operations had completely shifted overseas 3 years ago. The only reason this psychopath remained in the country all this time was to wrap up her loose ends, and to play this deeply twisted game of atonement with me. I was physically shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. For the very first time in my life, I realized that falling in love with Seraphina was the biggest, most fatal mistake I had ever made. How could someone this brutally cold-blooded ever be worthy of my love? How could a monster like her even comprehend what love was? I pointed a trembling finger straight toward the bedroom door. Seraphina tiredly took off her coat and draped it over my shivering shoulders. "You can go out to the rest of the house, but don't even think about escaping." When she finally left, I heard the heavy click of the bedroom door locking from the outside. I frantically scrambled out of bed to pry open the windows, only to discover she had literally welded the second-floor windows completely shut, too. I let out a dark, hollow, self-mocking chuckle. Seraphina liked things dead quiet. She had designed our entire marital home in a sterile, lifeless, black and white color palette. Every single decoration was curated strictly according to her cold taste. For 3 grueling years, I had clung to a microscopic sliver of hope, desperately searching for the truth, praying that one day, Seraphina would realize I didn't send that text and fall back in love with me. But now I knew the brutal truth. My romance with Seraphina had been a sick, twisted joke from the very beginning. She only ever loved herself. I stood up and violently smashed the expensive ornaments on the nightstand. Then I shattered the lamps. Then I trashed the cabinets. I was going to completely obliterate this so-called marital home. When I found her personal safe, the password was predictably easy to guess. It was my birthday. Inside the safe lay several printed agreements. I was just about to rip them all to shreds when my eyes snagged on 2 bold words. Divorce agreement. I froze in my tracks. The document already had Seraphina's elegant signature slashed across the bottom. The terms brutally dictated that I would leave the marriage with absolutely nothing. But tucked right behind that agreement were 2 plastic surgery appointment confirmations. One was for me, and the other was for Lysander. My breathing hitched in my throat. Seraphina wanted me to get surgery to look exactly like Lysander. But then, what about Lysander? Who the hell is he supposed to look like? My mind flashed back to Lysander wearing my clothes, smugly pretending to be me. Wait. Did Seraphina want the 2 of us to surgically swap faces and switch identities entirely? I was absolutely horrified by the sheer, unhinged insanity of this plan. I couldn't even fathom what twisted, broken logic she used to justify doing something like this. Click. The door suddenly swung open. Lysander casually walked in, his eyes practically oozing with toxic, bitter jealousy. "This is all your fault for coming home early. Now, my dear sister insists on moving abroad first, before we even do the kidney transplant." So that was it. Lysander had bribed the doctor to fake his kidney disease, just so he could casually assassinate me on the operating table. But now that Seraphina had suddenly decided to flee the country, his grand murder plot was completely ruined. So, Lysander had to switch to plan B. He casually tossed a sharp dagger onto the floor, trying to bait me into ending it all myself. "Sister sent that text," he sneered. "For all these years, she couldn't bear the guilt of getting her own family killed, so she forced you to take the fall. It's like standing on the moral high ground magically erases her own sins. Caspian, having to donate a kidney for bloody crimes you didn't even commit? That must be so incredibly painful. Honestly, what's even left for you to live for in this world? I'm giving you a merciful chance to check out early. End the suffering right now." I took a long, deep breath. Instead of picking up the dagger like a defeated dog, I picked up the 2 plastic surgery reservations and shoved them right into his hands. "Do you love Seraphina? Because if you do, I'll give you a much better option." Seraphina had already booked the surgeries. If Lysander could bribe the surgeon, then the person who goes into that operating room would be me, but the person who walks out with my face would be Lysander. Seraphina wouldn't even be able to tell the difference right away. "But I have one condition," I said, my voice dead serious. "Tell me the address of my old orphanage." After Lysander agreed and left, Seraphina never stepped foot in my room again, except to slide bland food through the bottom of the door. Late at night, I would always hear her unhinged voice echoing from the dark hallway. She would call out my name Caspian over and over again, throwing a pathetic, emotional fit until the middle of the night. Yet, whenever she actually came to deliver my meals, I could always spot fresh, glaring hickeys bruised into her neck. Whenever I was let out to use the restroom, she would deliberately be out there, passionately making out with Lysander right in the open. I would just walk past them with a completely deadpan expression, return to my makeshift prison cell, and silently wait for her to lock the door. Eventually, Seraphina couldn't take my crushing apathy anymore. With furious, red eyes, she violently knocked over my dinner tray and pinned me hard against the wall, interrogating me. Caspian, I am getting intimate with another man right in front of your face. Why doesn't your heart hurt? I looked at her with absolutely zero emotion. You're calling him Caspian, right? That's me, isn't it? Why should I be jealous of myself? Seraphina was left completely and utterly speechless. Her eyes just grew redder and redder with frustrated tears. Right before those tears could actually fall, she abruptly let go of me. It's fine. Once we go abroad, everything will go back to normal. The moment Seraphina left, the heavy click of the deadbolt echoed through the room. She had locked me in. Again, I whipped out my phone, fingers flying across the screen to text my buddy. Man, I'm trapped. How the hell am I supposed to sneak out my blood or hair for this DNA test? His reply pinged back almost instantly. Bro, relax. They already used the blood sample you gave at the hospital last time. The Sterling family is running the test right now. Since they are ultra elite, they won't show their faces until your identity is 100% confirmed. Plus, you are married to Seraphina. With the Sterling family's massive political background, they will never ever approve of your marriage. Bro, you really need to brace yourself. From what I've gathered, all of the Liu family's assets have already been moved overseas, while the Sterling family cannot leave the country. You and Seraphina are destined to be ripped apart anyway. I slowly put my phone down, a terrifying realization hitting me like an absolute freight train. It all made sense now. I finally understood exactly why Seraphina wanted me and Lysander to swap identities. 3 years ago, did she already know about my true background? Before I could even process this insane conspiracy, the lock clicked. Seraphina was back. Caspian, let's go. She didn't explain, just drove me straight to a shady plastic surgery clinic. Lysander was already waiting. The second he saw her, that pathetic leech practically threw himself into her arms. Sister, don't you worry about a thing. I will play my role flawlessly. I will times become times Caspian. He purposely dragged out my name, dripping with arrogance. Seraphina gave the doctor a curt nod, then turned to me. Her voice dropped into a rare, sickeningly sweet tone. Caspian, honey, Lysander's attending physician just called. They found a new kidney donor. You don't have to donate yours to him anymore. I just gave a cold shrug and walked straight into the operating room. Lysander's whole kidney disease was a total scam anyway. Whether there was a magical donor or not was entirely up to his ridiculous script, because starting today, Lysander was Caspian. Just as my foot crossed the threshold, Seraphina's voice called out behind me, trembling with a pathetic insecurity. Caspian, do you still love me? I said absolutely nothing. I just stepped inside, letting the heavy doors of the operating room slide shut, completely severing her desperate gaze. The moment we were alone inside, Lysander frantically started ripping off his clothes. Hurry up, let's swap outfits. We cannot let my sister notice a single flaw. I stared at him, mechanically slipping into his clothes while he took mine. Then, we just sat there in the sterile operating room, waiting out the clock for the perfect amount of time. The second those doors swung open, Seraphina rushed forward like a madwoman. She threw her arms around the heavily bandaged Lysander, fully convinced he was her post-surgery husband. Oh, Caspian. It is almost time. It is almost over. No one will ever be able to take you away from me now. I glanced at the two of them clutching each other and smoothly slipped into Lysander's trademark whiny voice. Sister, you promised me that as long as I got the surgery to look exactly like Caspian, you would divorce him and marry times me. Seraphina spun around, not missing a single beat, and slapped a divorce agreement right in front of me. Sign it. I let out a giddy, exaggerated laugh. You got it, sister. Let me wear Caspian's face and escort you to the Civil Affairs Bureau to finalize this divorce right now. After breezing through the paperwork and strutting out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Seraphina impatiently dragged the bandaged Lysander toward her car, but she didn't forget to toss her final, bossy instructions at me, the guy she thought was Lysander. Listen closely, Lysander. Once you finish your fake kidney surgery, come find us abroad. Since you currently have Caspian's face, you have to live under his identity from now on. I packed all of his ID cards in that bag you are holding. Even though Seraphina was just trying to keep Lysander quiet, I knew the dark, twisted truth. Wearing my face, there was absolutely zero chance that idiot would ever make it out of the country. The ultra-powerful Sterling family had already tracked my location to Northern City. They were going to kick down the doors very soon. Before that could happen, Seraphina desperately needed to whisk me away to a foreign country, far beyond the Sterling family's massive reach. Through her insanely twisted logic of atonement over the past 3 torturous years, she actually believed we had finally cleared our debts to her dead parents and to Lysander. She even thought she was being incredibly gracious, allowing Lysander to steal my face so he could sit back and enjoy the Sterling family's infinite wealth. Since he was always a greedy little opportunist who loved playing the system, she figured he would gladly snatch up the deal. Once she and I were safely overseas, I would be forced to live under Lysander's identity forever, remarry her, and give her children. Dreaming of this deranged, happily ever after scenario, Seraphina couldn't help but let out a smug little smirk. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly spotted a sleek luxury car with a capital city license plate creeping nearby. Her heart nearly leaped out of her chest in pure, unadulterated panic. She violently rolled up the windows and barked at her driver, "To the airport. We are leaving the country right this second." As Seraphina's car sped off into the dusty distance, I just stood there on the pavement, clutching my crisp, brand-new divorce certificate. And finally, for the very first time in 3 agonizing years, I let out a genuine, completely unburdened smile. I had already secured the address to my old orphanage. Honestly, if the mighty Sterling family decided they didn't want me after all, I could just go back there and live out my days in absolute peace. But just as I turned on my heel to leave, a menacing, ultra-sleek car blocked my path. The driver stepped out, bowing respectfully as he opened the rear door. "Young master, Madam and master have sent me to bring you home." The Sterling family's car smoothly accelerated, heading straight for a private airstrip. Right at 1 p.m., Seraphina ruthlessly deleted Lysander's WeChat contact, completely blacklisted his number, and boarded a first-class flight to Country M with her precious Caspian. Exactly half an hour later, I stepped onto the Sterling family's massive private jet, soaring directly toward the capital city. Seraphina and I were officially done. We would never cross paths again in this lifetime. Meanwhile, over in Country M, the very second they stepped off the plane, Seraphina dragged the heavily bandaged Lysander straight to the lavish marital mansion she had prepared months in advance. The front door passcode? My exact birthday. The interior design? Completely decked out in my favorite minimalist style. Even the massive walk-in closet was stuffed to the brim with my favorite luxury clothing brands. To secure her violently twisted happily ever after with me, she had been scheming in the shadows for 3 entire years. And now? It was finally harvest time. Seraphina tenderly kissed Lysander's bandaged hand. "Caspian, darling, do you like it here?" Hidden beneath all that thick gauze, Lysander's face was probably turning aggressively green with sheer envy, but the idiot couldn't express a single ounce of dissatisfaction. After all, he had to play the part. He was Caspian right now, not Lysander. He forced himself to squeeze out a stiff smile and nodded eagerly. Knowing he couldn't instantly replicate my exact speaking voice, he strategically coughed twice, pretending his throat was completely shot from the anesthesia. He rasped out, "What does it even matter if I like it or not? You already divorced me." That weak, grievance-filled rasp acted like absolute magic, instantly triggering Seraphina's obsessive protective instincts. She threw her arms around him, hugging him fiercely. "Don't be silly. You will just use Lysander's identity, and we will get married all over again." You see, 3 years ago, while aggressively investigating my background, Seraphina finally stumbled upon the missing link. She discovered that I was highly likely the long-lost child of the untouchable, ultra-powerful Sterling family from the capital. Back then, the Liu family's core business empire was already fully entrenched overseas, and Seraphina was dead set on immigrating. If I ever officially returned to my biological titan of a family, there was zero chance she could ever keep me. Forget about whether the elite Sterlings would even approve of a lowly marriage like hers. If she actually married the heir to such a heavily monitored, politically sensitive family, foreign intelligence agencies would immediately flag her for international espionage. The Liu family's entire billions-dollar overseas empire would be vaporized in an instant. Seraphina didn't want to torch her family's legacy, but she absolutely refused to let me go. Conveniently, her parents died in a fiery car crash right around that exact time. Jackpot. She finally had the sick, perfect excuse to lock me up in the house, endlessly torturing me under the twisted guise of atonement. She blew an astronomical amount of cash and effort, secretly relocating my entire orphanage to a totally different city, deliberately throwing the Sterling family off my scent for 3 excruciating years, but money couldn't hide me forever. Eventually, the Sterlings managed to track me down to Northern City anyway. The walls were closing in, and Seraphina realized her time was officially up. She had to smuggle her precious husband out of the country, right now. So, she masterfully manipulated Lysander into this insane face-swapping scheme, solely so I could live abroad safely, using his identity. Hearing Seraphina's vow to remarry him, Lysander was absolutely over the moon. Finally, he could use his very own identity to marry the wealthy woman of his literal dreams. Unzipping his excitement, he impatiently blurted out, "When?" Seraphina's brow instantly furrowed. Wait, she had fully expected Caspian to be furious with her. She definitely didn't expect him to just accept this bizarre arrangement with such giddy enthusiasm. A cold flutter of unease rippled through her chest. Narrowing her eyes, she decided to test him. "All those awful things I did to you back in the country. Caspian, do you really not blame me?" Well, of course Lysander didn't blame her. He wasn't the poor bastard getting tortured in a basement. Why on earth would he be mad? Besides, for the past 3 years, she had pampered that leech like a literal prince. Lysander almost joyfully yelled out, "Oh, I don't blame you at all." But then his peanut-sized brain finally caught up. Right, he was supposed to be Caspian right now, and the real Caspian would absolutely never react like that. Panicking, he quickly buried his bandaged face deep into her chest and started fake crying bitterly. I was so resentful at first. I swear I didn't send that text." He paused for dramatic effect, then expertly pivoted. But, I am your husband. It is perfectly normal for spouses to bear each other's sins. Besides, that is all in the past now, right? Haven't we finally reached the light at the end of the tunnel? Seraphina's chest instantly tightened with a heavy, agonizing guilt. She reached out, lovingly wiping the fake, crocodile tears from his gauze-wrapped face. "Oh, honey, please don't cry. Your facial incisions haven't even healed yet. I will take you to the private VIP hospital to fully recover first. The very second those bandages come off, we will get married." Snuggling deeper into her warm embrace, Lysander practically giggled out loud like a schoolgirl. He had won. He could finally marry his ultimate true love and officially secure his spot as a core member of the wealthy Lu family. Meanwhile, in his mind, that pathetic little orphan Caspian got absolutely nothing, just 3 miserable years of sheer, unadulterated hell for free. What an absolutely tragic loser. Lysander suffered through days in the hospital until it was finally time to take off the bandages. The second the gauze peeled away, Seraphina just couldn't hold back. She grabbed him and kissed him passionately. Caspian, her sweet Caspian. They were finally, truly together. With a bright smile, Seraphina pulled a massive diamond ring from behind her back and slid it right onto Lysander's finger. "I know how much you love extreme sports," she beamed. "I even bought all the gear. We are going to skydive from the highest peak in Country M to celebrate finally getting what we want." Lysander just stared affectionately at the giant rock on his finger, completely tuning out whatever suicidal nonsense she was rambling about jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. Ever since this faker stepped foot into the Lu household, his one and only life goal was to marry Seraphina. After surviving countless brutal hardships, he had actually pulled it off. He sneakily wrapped his arms around her waist and whispered, "Sister Ruya, let's do it right now." Thanks to his hardcore vocal training over the past few days, his voice sounded sickeningly close to mine. Seraphina knew my habits like the back of her hand and was clearly turned on, but shockingly, she held herself back. "Be good," she murmured, gently kissing his forehead. "Let's save it for our wedding night. I want to respect you." Lysander froze solid. A sudden, toxic wave of dark fury boiled up inside him. Why the hell is it that when it comes to Caspian, this cruel woman suddenly remembers the word respect? A flash of pure, venomous hatred crossed his eyes, but he quickly slapped on his fragile, delicate mask. "Ruya," he sighed softly, "now that I am technically using Lysander's identity, if you keep calling me Caspian, won't people get suspicious?" Seraphina paused, realizing he actually made a rock-solid point. Her gaze softened, and she immediately agreed to change the nickname. "Lysander, I wronged you so much in the past," she vowed. "As long as we never go back to our home country, I will go with you wherever you want." Lysander smirked viciously in his head. Step 1. Change the name. Slowly but surely, he was going to completely erase my existence from her heart. 3 days later, Seraphina dragged him up a freezing, towering mountain in Country M. When she looked back, she was shocked to see him pale as a ghost and shivering in pure terror. This was obviously Lysander's first time skydiving. He nervously gripped her sleeve in a death grip, completely terrified to even peek at the sheer, dizzying drop below. "Ruya, when are we jumping?" he stammered, secretly cursing me 1,000 times in his head for apparently having such a suicidal hobby. Seraphina just pulled him into a warm, comforting hug and kissed the back of his trembling hand. "It has been way too long since you last jumped, huh? Getting a little scared?" she teased. She was absolutely reveling in the feeling of Caspian relying on her so helplessly. But before he could even squeeze out a response, she ruthlessly shoved him straight out of the helicopter and immediately dove out right after him. The insane adrenaline rush of the freefall made the chronically stressed Seraphina scream out in pure, wild exhilaration. Meanwhile, right below her, Lysander was screaming his lungs out in absolute, mind-numbing terror. In his blind panic, the idiot deployed his parachute way too early, totally failed to control the wind direction, and ended up getting violently tossed around the sky like a broken rag doll. Seraphina naturally was not going to pass up a prime opportunity to play the hero. She skillfully steered her chute toward him, fully planning to guide him down and save the day. But before she could even shout a single instruction over the roaring wind, they somehow drifted straight into a massive wind tunnel. The violent, swirling gale tossed them both around like fragile kites with snapped strings. By some absolute miracle, they actually survived. Their parachutes tangled together and got snagged hard in the thick branches of a massive tree. Seraphina was the first to slice herself down using her survival knife. Then she climbed right back up to rescue the endlessly sobbing Lysander. Having just survived a crazy near-death experience, her adrenaline spiked through the roof, and she suddenly felt an overwhelming, burning urge to get intimate right then and there. Lysander was completely traumatized, trembling uncontrollably and burying his face deep in her chest, weeping like a pathetic child. Seeing her supposed lover, looking so incredibly fragile, just flipped a primal switch in Seraphina's brain. She threw her respect rule straight out the window and eagerly slipped her hand under his shirt. Lysander did not even give her a chance to speak. He crashed his lips fiercely against hers. "Do it," he breathed heavily. "Make me yours, right now." Seraphina lost every last ounce of her restraint. Spotting an abandoned wooden cabin nearby, she literally kicked the door open, carried him inside, and they threw themselves into a passionate, no-holds-barred session. After the wild storm finally passed, she tenderly kissed his forehead. Her voice was husky as she whispered, "You have suffered so much." Out of pure, ingrained habit, her hand drifted down to gently stroke his lower back. "I had a very distinct, butterfly-shaped birthmark right in that exact spot." Suddenly, the warmth completely drained from her face. "Wait, something is deeply wrong. You are not Caspian," she gasped. There was absolutely no birthmark on his back. In a flash of blind rage, Seraphina practically Sparta-kicked Lysander straight off the bed. "You are Lysander," she screamed. Lysander was still dazed in the afterglow and just could not compute the sheer danger of the situation fast enough. "Ruya, what do you mean?" he whined. "I am your fiancée." Seraphina's eyes turned into absolute, freezing glaciers. She brutally yanked him over and thoroughly checked the man's lower back one more time. Blank. Nothing. Plot twist of the century. No butterfly meant no peace. If this pathetic fake is not Caspian, then where the hell did my Caspian go? Her mind violently flashed back to the image of that luxury car parked outside the Civil Affairs Bureau back in the capital. Her heart physically ached with panic. Glaring down at the pathetic worm, who was still desperately trying to act innocent, Seraphina delivered a brutal, unyielding slap right across his face. "Tell the truth right now. Are you going to speak, or do I make you?" Seraphina was never, ever known for having a good temper. She ruthlessly wrapped her fingers tightly around Lysander's slender neck and squeezed without a single shred of mercy. Lysander's eyes bugged out. He never actually expected her to try and murder him. But then it hit him. Seraphina was the exact same psycho woman who had once locked me in a sub-zero freezer room and coldly left me there to rot. When I was finally let out of that freezer, I was covered in severe frostbite and nearly died in the intensive care unit. Lysander always knew she had the cold, ruthless heart of a wolf, but he never thought those lethal fangs would one day be aimed directly at his own throat. The oxygen in his lungs rapidly depleted. His neck felt like it was about to violently snap in half. Terrified, he finally broke down and begged for his miserable life. "Sister, please, let me go, for the sake of my parents saving your life. Please, just spare me." he choked out. Seraphina just scoffed, her eyes dead and cold. With a violent shove, she threw him completely across the wooden floor. Lysander gagged and coughed violently, too terrified to even take a proper breath. Shaking like a leaf, he crawled over and desperately clung to her pant leg. "Sister, you will still marry me, right?" "Marry you?" Seraphina practically spat the words, suddenly recalling the man she had just divorced back at the bureau. Oh God. If this pathetic trash on the floor was a cheap knockoff, that meant the person she actually divorced was me. She had schemed and plotted for 3 agonizing years, only to personally hand me the golden key to escape my marital prison. And all of this absolute, catastrophic failure was entirely the fault of the pathetic, sniveling worm groveling right at her feet. Lysander. She delivered a sickeningly brutal kick right into his ribs, then dug a satellite phone out of her jacket to immediately call for an emergency extraction. While waiting for the rescue chopper to arrive, Seraphina casually lit a cigar, took a long drag, and mockingly gestured for him to crawl closer. Lysander, whose ribs felt like they were practically shattered from the kick, instantly lit up with desperate joy, obediently kneeling on the floor like a trained dog. "Sister, even though I am Lysander, I am more than willing to become Caspian completely. Just let me stay by your side, please." He had lived in the Lu mansion since he was 10 years old. If he lost Seraphina now, he had absolutely nowhere else to go. His entire life would mean nothing. Seraphina neither agreed nor disagreed. Instead, she just ground the heel of her heavy designer boot viciously straight into his spine. "Do you know what I despise about you the most?" she whispered. Lysander whimpered in agonizing pain. Seraphina slowly stood up as the deafening roar of a rescue helicopter echoed from just outside the cabin. Her voice was pure ice. "Your pathetic, delusional illusion of actually being clever." Lysander genuinely did not understand what she meant. Seeing the rescue team finally arrive, he scrambled up, desperately trying to follow her onto the chopper. But with a single, lethal glare, Seraphina silently ordered the heavily armed rescue team to physically throw him back down into the dirt. She slowly zipped up her jacket, looking down at him. "Lysander, since you were so incredibly eager to accompany me to Country M, you can just stay here forever." Following her cold command, the rescue team ruthlessly dragged Lysander back into the rotting cabin and tied him securely to a heavy table leg with thick, unbreakable ropes. It was only then that Lysander finally realized what was happening. He thrashed violently against his bonds, screaming at the absolute top of his lungs. "Sister Ruya, I am begging you, do not leave me behind. I will be good. I will be your obedient dog. I will do anything," he shrieked. But the cabin door was just left wide open, letting the freezing, bitter mountain winds violently howl inside. Lysander watched in absolute, gut-wrenching despair as Seraphina coldly boarded the helicopter, ascended into the dark clouds, and vanished forever. Left entirely alone in this desolate, uncharted wilderness, the chilling, hungry howls of wolves began to echo in the distance. The cabin was literally rotting apart. His phone had zero signal. Absolutely no one was ever coming to save him. Seraphina's sheer, psychotic cruelty truly knew no bounds. Meanwhile, right after landing from the helicopter, Seraphina did not even bother going to the hospital to treat her bleeding scrapes. She immediately dialed her assistant. "Book me the fastest flight back to our country. Right now," she barked. Her assistant was totally confused and carefully tried to remind her. "But, Madam President, you have an appointment to try on wedding dresses with the groom this afternoon, and a VIP dinner with the CEO of MG Group at 8 p.m., to finalize the merger. Cancel all of it," she snarled furiously. The sheer, terrifying thought that I might have been taken back by the powerful Sterling family filled her entire soul with an apocalyptic level of panic. "He loves me," she desperately reasoned with herself, pacing frantically. "He loved me enough to willingly die for me, even if I tortured him in the name of atonement. We were supposed to live happily ever after now. Why the hell would he want to escape?" The heavy, suffocating frustration in her chest had absolutely no outlet, burning her up from the inside out. She ripped open WeChat and absolutely bombarded me with frantic, desperate messages. Not a single reply came through. Refusing to just give up, she scrolled through her contacts, found my number, and hit call. It rang endlessly, but nobody picked up. With a terrifyingly dark, twisted expression, she slowly lowered her phone and got into her waiting car to head straight to the airport. During the entire flight, Seraphina obsessively scrolled through my WeChat moments, unable to look away. The earliest posts she saw were all about my pure, unfiltered joy regarding our upcoming engagement. But suddenly, her hand stopped dead in its tracks. She noticed something glaringly wrong. Someone had clearly tampered with her phone. My contact name had actually been swapped with Lysander's. She quickly scrolled down in a panic, only to realize that my moments had been completely locked to outsiders 3 days ago. Caught in pure, delusional denial, she opened her contacts once again. Sure enough, the phone number listed right under my name was actually Lysander's digits. She let out a chilling, downright psychotic laugh. Right then and there, she wanted to drag Lysander all the way back from that mountain just to skin him alive. He actually had the nerve to mess with her phone contacts. That scumbag was truly begging for a gruesome, painful death. But considering that mountain was practically crawling with starving wolves, she figured he wouldn't exactly meet a pleasant end out there anyway. Pushing that thought aside, the absolute second her plane touched down in Northern City, she bolted straight into action. You see, she had already liquidated all her properties in Northern City, and that included the very marital home we used to share. She originally planned to just camp out right in front of the house, hoping to see if I would come back to collect my things. Instead, she ran directly into the new owner's cleaning crew, who were busy tossing boxes of my junk right into a garbage truck. Driven by some crazy, ghostly intuition, Seraphina actually followed that garbage truck all the way to the city dump. She recognized it immediately. The worn-out diary sitting at the very top of a cardboard box was mine. Standing right in the middle of a literal landfill, Seraphina threw $10,000 at a highly confused garbage scavenger, just to buy back that single box of my old belongings. Dressed head to toe in bespoke elite sportswear, she looked ridiculously out of place amidst the reeking, disgusting piles of trash. And yet, she just collapsed right onto the filthy ground, not caring about the stench in the slightest. It was my diary. In her mind, the entire book should be completely filled with my overflowing, desperate love for her. With violently trembling hands, she flipped to the very first page. May 3rd. Ruya seemed to be in a really good mood today. I even made her absolute favorite steamed egg custard. I never in a million years expected her to fly into a blind rage and completely smash the bowl right onto the floor. It turns out she only liked it in the past because it was literally the only dish I knew how to make. In reality, she absolutely despises egg custard. Seraphina's shaking fingers lightly traced over the dried, crinkled watermarks left on the page. Did I cry that day? Her breath suddenly hitched, her heart feeling exactly like it was being brutally squeezed by some invisible iron grip. After that horrible day, I never made my signature egg custard for her ever again. July 6th, it is pouring rain outside. The weather is absolutely freezing, but Ruya forced me to kneel out in the yard to atone for my sins. July 7th, Ruya and Lysander spent the entire afternoon completely locked inside the bedroom. I really do not know what they were doing in there. September 10th, Ruya finally let me out of the freezing cold storage room. I had to kneel right before her parents' memorial tablet just to atone once again. From the living room, I faintly heard a woman's breathy, muffled moans. I couldn't hear it clearly, though. Maybe my fever was just way too high and I was totally hallucinating. Seraphina's heavy tears fell right onto the diary, perfectly overlapping with my own old, dried tear stains. The next few pages were no longer peaceful, mundane records of our daily life. My pen strokes became sharp, manic daggers, ruthlessly carving up Seraphina's entire heart. After countless days and agonizing nights of pure helplessness, I finally penned my first real question against the woman I loved so deeply. When will Ruya finally investigate the real truth? When will she ever love me again? The handwriting progressively grew more chaotic, erratic, and almost completely illegible to the naked eye. Only the handwriting left on the very last page was as clear as day, and it delivered a truly fatal blow. Whatever, Seraphina, I just do not love you anymore. I honestly wish you and Lysander a long, absolutely miserable life together. The dark ink on this specific page was still fresh. It was dated the exact same day she finally divorced me. Seraphina completely panicked, violently throwing the little diary away from her. Impossible! This absolutely cannot be his diary. He loved me so damn much, there is no way in hell he would ever write that he doesn't love me. She screamed like a madwoman into the void of the empty junkyard. Caspian, you must still love me. As long as I am willing to finally marry you, you will obediently come right back to my arms, right? The old scavenger gave her a deeply weirded out look, and slowly picked up the diary she had just thrown. Miss, if you don't want this thing, I am just going to throw it right into the incinerator. Seraphina's head violently snapped up. She glared at the old man with pure, murderous intent. That is my property. She sprinted right over, aggressively snatched the diary back, shoved it deep into her jacket, and drove off like an absolute maniac. Her assistant suddenly called, "President Liu, we finally found out about that capital city vehicle the target got into right outside the Civil Affairs Bureau. But we cannot trace the registered owner due to some top-tier security clearance." "It doesn't matter if you can't trace it." She angrily snapped back into the phone. She was going to personally come and find me herself. Northern City was well over 1,000 miles away from the bustling capital. By the time she finally arrived at the towering, massive gates of the Sterling family estate, her eyes were completely bloodshot and she could barely even stand upright. But in her twisted, delusional mind, she actually felt entirely satisfied. When he finally sees me, he is going to be so incredibly thrilled. He will hug me tight and tell me exactly how much he missed me. I must have just been gaslit by Lysander into pushing my true love away. Once I fully explain absolutely everything, I know he will forgive me instantly. She stood proudly at the grand iron gates, desperately trying to project the powerful aura of an elegant CEO officially requesting an audience. But the estate security guards just looked at her as if she were some kind of alien. They simply couldn't help but notice the overwhelming, lingering stench of literal garbage emanating straight off her body. Even though she was absolutely dripping in expensive designer brands, the head guard debated for a quick second, then sent someone inside to notify the madam of the house. Mrs. Sterling's cold response was relayed back very quickly. "You want to see Caspian? Then you will kneel out here until I am completely satisfied." Seraphina dropped straight to her knees without a single microsecond of hesitation. As long as she could finally see me, what did a little hazing from her future mother-in-law even matter? As the evening sun finally began to set, a sleek, pitch-black luxury car smoothly rolled to a stop right beside her. The driver stepped out and respectfully opened the heavy door. "Young master, please step out." I gave a mild, totally indifferent glance down at the pathetic woman kneeling in the dirt, and without even turning my head back around, I confidently walked straight past her toward my family's ancestral mansion. I was wearing a perfectly tailored, pale blue designer suit that was personally designed for me by my own mother. Back when I first arrived at the Grand Sterling household, I was genuinely pretty anxious about fitting in. But after finally meeting my real, biological parents, all of that heavy anxiety mostly faded completely away. Even though I just couldn't immediately be perfectly and flawlessly intimate with them, simply treating them with the genuine respect and care that real parents deserved, without asking for a single thing in return, was actually quite easy to do. What was truly annoying right now, however, was the sheer fact that some wire in Seraphina's broken brain had completely short-circuited, causing her to lose her absolute mind and kneel right at my front door. I had absolutely zero desire to even acknowledge her sad existence, and I was just about to tell the guards to toss the trash out immediately. But the exact moment I casually brushed past her, Seraphina desperately reached out and grabbed my hand. She looked up at me, her wide eyes absolutely swimming with pathetic, desperate tears. "Caspian," I stopped, and just looked down at her. In our entire 3 years together, this was the very first time I was ever looking at Seraphina from a dominant, top-down perspective. Northern City was always bitterly cold and highly prone to incredibly heavy snow. The sheer number of times I had to kneel outside in that freezing yard just to atone for her sick games was completely uncountable. Every single time, Seraphina would stand proudly on the warm porch, holding a piping hot cup of tea, staring down at me with an air of absolute supremacy. Back then, I just couldn't ever understand how the sweet Seraphina, who used to love me so much, could suddenly become so ruthlessly cruel. But now, I finally got it. Holding someone completely trapped in the palm of your hand under the fake guise of atonement, wielding absolute, unquestionable power over their very life and death. That sickening feeling of total control, it was way more intoxicating to her than actually being in a loving relationship. Just looking down at the pathetically kneeling Seraphina right in front of me made me fully realize this twisted, universal truth. I calmly raised my hand and delivered a crisp, perfectly resounding slap directly to Seraphina's cheek. Her body swayed heavily to the side from the sheer force. Yet surprisingly, there wasn't a single trace of anger on her face. Instead, she frantically grabbed my slapping hand and gently blew on my skin. "Baby, does your hand hurt?" I simply hooked my lips into a cold, mocking sneer. Using love as a toxic weapon could always easily brainwash the tortured party into total, willing submission. However, I wasn't anywhere nearly as psychotic as Seraphina was. I had absolutely zero interest in trying to train human beings like obedient dogs. I aggressively yanked my hand back from her grip and continued walking straight into the estate without missing a single beat. Throw her out. Having received their strict orders, the massive guards instantly moved in to violently evict her from the premises. Seraphina had already driven for 13 grueling hours straight. Put that on top of kneeling in the dirt for God knows how long, and she had absolutely zero physical strength left in her body. The security guards easily hoisted her up by the arms and ruthlessly dragged her right down the paved mountain road. The Sterling family's massive ancestral estate was built on a totally private mountain, so any vehicle going up or down had to be strictly cleared by the family first. Since Seraphina had absolutely no official authorization, her luxury car was firmly blocked at the very base of the mountain. She had literally snuck into the estate by hiking through the treacherous, unpaved woods in the dark. At this very moment, my icy, dismissive attitude completely shattered her fragile psyche. She didn't even register the agonizing, stinging pain radiating from her badly scraped knees. Her broken mind was entirely consumed by just one single, obsessive thought. How do I win him back? Without him, I'm literally going to die. Seraphina's desperate thoughts echoed as a sleek luxury car purred up the winding mountain path. The estate guards roughly dragged her to the curb, forcing her to yield the right of way. As the vehicle cruised past, the heavily tinted window slowly rolled down. The woman inside Isolde shot Seraphina a single, ice-cold look of pure dismissal before the glass slid back up. Without missing a beat, the car glided smoothly through the massive iron gates of the Sterling estate. Isolde clearly knew her way around my family's massive compound. She navigated the maze of lavish corridors like she owned the place, stepping right into the private courtyard where my mother was relaxing. She gracefully handed over a stack of flawlessly wrapped gifts. "Auntie," she greeted sweetly. My mom beamed, setting down her gardening shears, and immediately waved me over. "Caspian, get over here and meet her. This is the eldest daughter of the B family, your dad's oldest friend." My mom smiled, her eyes twinkling. "She's also your fiancée." Isolde. Hearing that name times Isolde, times I legitimately froze in my tracks. Wait, I actually knew the gorgeous woman standing right in front of me. Back in my miserable days, grinding as a financial director at Vanguard Investments, we had crossed paths. She was the shadowy, untouchable boss pulling the strings behind Vanguard. And ironically, Vanguard Investments was just a microscopic drop in the massive ocean of assets, now registered under my own name. After dropping that absolute bombshell of an introduction, my mom clearly had zero intention of playing third wheel. She casually made up some flimsy excuse and bolted, leaving us alone to bond. I rubbed the back of my neck, forcing a stiff, awkward smile. My mom is totally just joking. But before my words could even hit the floor, Isolde cut me right off. Does the young master really not know? We've had a marriage arrangement since we were in diapers. If you hadn't been taken by those scumbags and lost to us for all those years, we would have tied the knot a long time ago. I just stood there, my jaw practically on the floor. I was completely, utterly speechless. I had absolutely no choice but to shut this down politely. "Miss Isolde, surely you know that I've been married before." Isolde didn't even blink, interrupting me for a second time. "Young master, strategic alliances between billionaire families like ours couldn't care less about your past. We only look at the sheer power and benefits an alliance brings to the table. Our social standings are a flawless match. It's highly suitable." I stayed dead silent for a second, frantically racking my brain for a better excuse to escape this. "Look, the Sterling family has plenty of other eligible, unmarried young men. You could literally take your pick from any of them." Isolde said absolutely nothing. She simply took a slow, deliberate step toward me, holding up her hand. Right there, dangling from her ring finger right in front of my face, was a tiny, tightly woven ring made of dried grass. I had absolutely no clue what she was trying to pull, but just as I opened my mouth to speak, she suddenly grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly tight. "When we were little kids, right in this exact spot, you wove this little grass ring, slipped it on my finger, and promised you were going to marry me. Don't tell me the young master has completely tossed his own promises in the trash." I scrambled through my childhood memories for what felt like an eternity, but my mind was totally blank. I couldn't dredge up a single thing from that far back. I really have forgotten. Honestly, the silly things kids blurt out shouldn't be taken so seriously. I was just about to firmly reject her again, but suddenly, Isolde's beautiful eyes welled up with tears. They turned bright red, and she slowly let go of my hand, looking absolutely crushed. That profoundly wounded expression hit me like a ton of bricks, stirring up a sudden, heavy pang of guilt in my chest. Wait, I stuttered awkwardly. Then, how about we just give this a try? If we don't vibe, we can just quietly go our separate ways. Deal? In a split second, Isolde's tears vanished, and she burst into a stunning, radiant laugh. Okay, and if the young master isn't perfectly satisfied with me, I will personally be the one to march up to Auntie and call the whole engagement off. I glanced down at that perfectly preserved little grass ring still resting on her finger and let out a soft sigh, giving her a gentle nod. For a fragile piece of grass to survive completely intact after decades, she must have protected it with an incredible amount of care. As for my toxic past with Seraphina, man, it was finally time for me to just let it all go. Plus, let's be real, Isolde was drop-dead gorgeous. Taking this for a test drive wouldn't hurt a bit. If our personalities clashed, I'd just firmly walk away. Besides, she had already promised to be the one to pull the plug and break the engagement if things went south. Isolde reached into the literal mountain of luxury gift boxes she'd brought and handed a sleek one right to me. A little meeting gift. Go on, open it and take a look. I sank into the plush sofa and popped the lid off the exquisite velvet box, only to find a binding legal document transferring the majority shares for Vanguard Investments. Before I could even process it, Isolde gracefully dropped to one knee and pinned a blindingly gorgeous sapphire cufflink right onto the sleeve of my suit. "Welcome home, my fiancé," she whispered warmly. My gaze darted over to a high-end fashion magazine left carelessly on the coffee table. I recognized it instantly. That exact sapphire cufflink had just been auctioned off for an absolutely astronomical price of $100 million. And the craziest part? That insane price tag didn't even amount to 1/10 of the Vanguard shares she just handed me. Isolde looked up, her voice velvet soft. "I know how much you love playing around with investments. So, I'm gifting this entire company to you just for practice. Auntie Sterling has already approved it." My fingers had barely brushed the cool surface of the sapphire, and before I could even sputter out a refusal, my mom's voice floated through the air. "Accept it, sweetie. It's exactly what you deserve. Don't worry about anything else." She had somehow pulled a ninja move, materializing right behind us without a sound, nodding with absolute approval at Isolde. "Why don't you stay the night here?" Mom offered. "Tomorrow, you can take our Caspian out for a nice stroll." Isolde flashed a sweet, polite smile and instantly agreed. Honestly, I just threw my hands up and stopped stressing over the ownership of the billion-dollar shares and the crazy expensive necklace. In the short handful of days since returning to the Sterling family, I deeply realized one terrifying truth. My family was fundamentally different from the standard wealthy elites I used to know. They didn't just run a business. They operated like an ancient, unfathomably massive aristocratic dynasty, and by some insane stroke of fate, I was the sole direct heir to the throne, the absolute only son of Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. On my very first day back, I had done some quick mental math. My parents casually possessed hundreds of billions of dollars. So, tossing me one little company like Vanguard Investments, it was literally pocket change to them. They genuinely didn't even need to bat an eye at it. The very next morning, Isolde whisked me away for some high-end window shopping in the city, but our luxury ride had barely exited the Sterling family's private territory when a frantic figure suddenly darted out into the middle of the road. Tires screeched as our driver slammed the brakes, just in time to avoid sending her flying into orbit. It was Seraphina. She looked absolutely unhinged, clearly having waited out there all night. She desperately rushed forward and violently pounded her fists against the window. "Caspian, please. Let's go home. I swear I don't blame you anymore. Let's just live a good life together, okay?" Isolde simply crossed her legs, observing the pathetic spectacle with highly amused eyes. "So, this is your ex-wife? Wow. Truly a clueless frog trapped at the bottom of a well." Without missing a beat, Isolde popped her door open, stepped out, and casually ordered our driver to get out. The exact second Isolde slid into the driver's seat, the horrifying reality of the situation finally hit Seraphina. Her face went completely pale. She tried to repeat her psychotic stunt of blocking the hood, but Isolde had already coldly floored the gas pedal. The massive engine roared, and the luxury car practically grazed Seraphina's clothes as it zoomed right past, disappearing from my line of sight in a total flash. Seraphina totally lost her balance, stumbling hard before collapsing pathetically onto the ground. She punched the asphalt, her face contorting with absolute, venomous denial. That was her Caspian. How the hell could he be riding shotgun with someone else? Meanwhile, safe inside the cabin, Isolde shot me a wicked, sideways smirk. Hey, I know a killer private racing track outside the city that isn't open to the public. Want to go for a spin and blow off some steam? I had never professionally trained in racing, but a primal love for adventure and thrill had always been the baseline of my personality. Faced with Isolde's wickedly tempting offer, I agreed without a second thought. Hell yeah. Compared to rotting away like a suffocated, heavily monitored prisoner, I much preferred to grow wild and totally free, with the roaring wind blowing past me. The moment we arrived at the sprawling track, Isolde had her crew prep a top-tier race car, casually tossing the heavy keys right to me. Show me what you've got, give it a try. I dropped into the driver's seat, gripped the wheel, and violently stomped on the gas. The monster engine screamed, shooting the race car forward like a literal bullet. The fierce wind aggressively whipped through my hair, and for the first time in a long time, I finally tasted the exhilarating flavor of pure freedom. Honestly, Seraphina had been an absolute, suffocating control freak. Back when we were dating, I had to accommodate her every single psychotic whim. I literally had to report my exact whereabouts just to step outside for a coffee. And then, using totally fabricated crimes, she had forcefully imprisoned me by her side to atone for 3 whole years. But right now, behind this wheel, having finally escaped her toxic grip, I felt more alive than ever. Off on the sidelines, Isolde stood outside the track, watching my blazing laps with an unconscious, stunningly beautiful smile on her lips. From the very first time she ever laid eyes on me, she felt in her bones that this fierce, untamed speed was exactly how I was meant to live. It was just that back then, she was shackled to an arranged fiancé, and I was blindly loyal to my girlfriend. The harsh barriers of reality had stopped her from taking that final step, but thankfully, the heavens had finally blessed her. After a lifetime of brutal twists and turns, I had ended up right back to her. Isolde briefly looked away from the track, summoning her assistant over. Find a strike team and deploy them to Country M to track down a very specific rat, she ordered, her voice dropping to a glacial chill. If he's breathing, drag him back to me. If he's permanently checked out, just forget it. She tapped her phone, forwarding Lander's photo to the man. Her eyes were so terrifyingly cold and bloodthirsty that her seasoned assistant almost lost his footing. But the instant she turned her gorgeous eyes back toward the track, she instantly restored her warm, spring breeze smile, waving excitedly at me as I tore around the corner. I slammed the brakes, bringing the roaring machine to a flawlessly smooth halt right at the starting line. I've always picked things up quickly. It took almost no time for me to completely master the beast of a vehicle. Isolde snatched a cold bottle of water from her assistant and handed it to me. Tired out yet, handsome? I grinned, my eyes practically sparkling with raw adrenaline. I vigorously shook my head. Are you kidding? This is pure enjoyment for me. How could I ever be tired? I tore up the asphalt for a few more blazing laps, grabbed an incredible lunch with Isolde, and then headed out alone to Vanguard Investments. I was officially the CEO of this titan now, so I actually had to step up and shoulder the massive responsibilities. After a relentlessly busy day crushing work, I headed home and blasted myself with a comfortable, steaming hot shower. Earlier, I had quietly ordered the head butler to keep strict tabs on Seraphina's movements. When I got the report that she had booked it out of her city right after I left, a sudden, ice-cold wave of deep unease washed over my chest. I hardly knew a soul in this massive capital, making me a prime target. After chewing on it for a minute, I marched down the hall and knocked on my parents' bedroom door. Mom? Dad? Could you guys arrange for a squad of your best people to protect me for the next few days? Based on my terrifying understanding of Seraphina, since she had gone through the insane trouble of tracking me all the way down in the capital, there was absolutely zero chance she would just casually give up and walk away. The next morning, I played it incredibly cautious and decided to lock myself down without leaving the estate. Even though my parents had assigned an elite squad of guards to shadow me, when dealing with a crazy ex, it was always better to be safe than sorry. I made up my mind to just work from home for a few days. Honestly, if I didn't have to step foot outside, I absolutely wouldn't. A couple of blissfully quiet days went by until my phone rang. It was the director of my old orphanage. Right after I officially reclaimed my place in the Sterling family, I had actually flown straight back there. I just needed to see with my own 2 eyes that everyone was safe and sound. Lately, the director and I had been hashing out a plan to move the entire orphanage to the capital. Over the phone, I could hear her let out this heavy, exhausting sigh. Caspian, do you remember Dudu, the little girl you found when you were just a kid? Well, we finally found her parents. Because of this, she won't be moving to the capital with the rest of us. Do you? I want to come down and see her, just one last time. I just froze. My mind instantly flashed back to that tiny girl who used to trail right behind me, sweetly calling out, "Big brother." Dudu was an abandoned infant I had stumbled upon at the orphanage gates when I was only 10 years old. She was this soft, incredibly quiet little bundle who practically never cried or put up a fuss. My heart had ached for her so badly that I actually rocked her to sleep for several nights straight. That is, until reality hit me, and I realized a 10-year-old kid couldn't exactly raise a baby, so I had to hand her over to the staff. Honestly, giving her up broke my heart for days. If it was Dudu, I bit my lip hard. I'll book a flight for tonight. I had to know exactly what kind of people her parents really were. If I missed out on saying goodbye to someone I truly cherished, all because I was busy hiding from a nightmare like Seraphina, it would be the absolute biggest regret of my life. The second I hung up, I immediately called my butler and had him dig into Seraphina's flight records. To my absolute shock, she had actually flown out of the country 3 days ago. I let out this massive, heavy sigh of relief. Just like that, all my anxiety completely vanished. After all, the Liu family's core assets were entirely based overseas. Seraphina probably hit a massive business crisis and had zero choice but to fly back and deal with the mess. Feeling lighter, I headed straight to my room to pack my bags. Meanwhile, miles away, Isolde stared coldly down at the emaciated, practically skeletal figure of Lysander. He had just been dragged straight off a plane. She pinched her nose in pure, unfiltered disgust. Take this trash to get washed. After being literally hosed down with freezing water, the assistant casually tossed Lysander onto the cold floor. The guy was entirely starved of energy. Yet, his twisted survival instinct somehow remembered that he could always use his pretty face to suck up to anyone in power. Lysander pathetically crawled right over to Isolde's feet, desperately trying to put on this seductive, pitiful act. Please, just give me a single bite to eat. I'll give myself to you. Completely. Isolde just glanced down, utterly unimpressed, and delivered a ruthless, bone-crushing kick straight to his chest without a single second of hesitation. Completely caught off guard, Lysander crashed violently onto the hard floor. He was just so blindingly hungry. During all those terrifying days trapped deep in the mountains, he had been forced to hide from wild wolves, unable to find a single, miserable scrap of food. The guy was literally surviving by digging up dirty tree roots. Now that he finally saw a living, breathing human again, he knew he had to cling to her like a parasite, no matter the cost. After all, his pretty face was his ultimate weapon. Isolde slowly crouched down, violently tilting his chin up as she studied his pathetic face for a few agonizing seconds. Finally, she reached her cold conclusion. Truly ugly, you're not even a fraction as handsome as my Caspian. That blind idiot Seraphina actually mistreated my man. For a cheap, pathetic knockoff like you? Isolde patted his cheek with mocking condescension. Do you even know who caused you to end up in this pathetic, miserable state? Lysander's sunken eyes instantly oozed pure, toxic hatred. It's Caspian. It's all his damn fault. Wrong, Isolde corrected with ice in her voice. Wasn't Seraphina the one who literally left you out there to die? Lysander violently gritted his teeth. But I love her. If that bastard Caspian hadn't shown up, I would absolutely be the one marrying her. I never would have ended up like this. With just those few desperate words, Isolde completely grasped his fatal weakness. Her enchanting, almost demonic voice whispered right into his ear. You really want to marry Seraphina? I can help you do exactly that. Lysander totally froze. His subconscious was screaming at him that free lunches don't just fall from the sky. But wait. What if it was just because he was so brilliant and incredibly handsome? Why wouldn't some wildly powerful woman want to sponsor a guy like him? Blinded by sheer, idiotic greed, Lysander nodded eagerly. Isolde smirked, a wicked glint in her eye. Starting today, I'm going to teach you the dark arts of high-level finance. Once you finally return to Seraphina and completely bleed the Liu family's massive fortune dry, you will be the absolute, untouchable master of their household. Even Seraphina won't be able to divorce you. She paused for dramatic effect, her lips hooking into a dangerously dark smile as her manicured finger traced slowly down toward his waist. However, you will have to endure a tiny bit of pain. Like, say, getting a certain birthmark, permanently tattooed onto your skin. Lysander nodded like an absolute madman. As long as he could marry Seraphina and get his revenge, he wasn't scared of a little pain. Isolde casually snatched a fresh handkerchief from her subordinate, wiping her hands perfectly clean of his filthy touch. After getting the Lysander problem sorted out, Isolde carefully drafted a text message. "Does my handsome young master have any free time tomorrow?" I replied almost instantly. "I need to head back to the orphanage to check on someone. I actually won't be in the capital tomorrow." "The orphanage? Huh." A sudden flash of intense, burning jealousy crossed Isolde's eyes. She fiercely blamed those scumbag kidnappers from all those years ago for totally robbing her of my childhood. She couldn't help but wonder, back when I was a little kid, had I ever woven cute little grass rings for anyone else? She carefully lifted the dried grass ring out of its velvet protective box, gave it a deeply fond look, and gently placed it right back. She quickly fired off another text. "Could you maybe send me the address? I would absolutely love to make a generous donation to the orphanage." Now, Seraphina had secretly relocated the facility down to Southern City. The absolute second my plane touched the tarmac, my phone buzzed with Isolde's message. I even noticed the little typing bubble popping up and disappearing intermittently in our chat window. I checked the exact timestamp. My last reply to her was literally 2 whole hours ago, right before I boarded the flight and stashed my phone. Wait, did Isolde seriously just stare at her screen, waiting for my reply for 2 straight hours? While my mind was blown pondering that, another quick message popped up. "If giving me the address is too inconvenient, a bank account number for a direct transfer works perfectly, too." I honestly couldn't help but chuckle out loud. This badass fiancée of mine was surprisingly adorable sometimes. She just wanted the address, yet she was being so incredibly, carefully indirect about it. Smiling, I dropped my location pin. "If Mrs. Isolde is willing, you should come down to the orphanage tomorrow. I'll personally cook you a hot meal." Isolde instantly shot back a hyper-enthusiastic, "Okay." I slid my phone into my pocket and hopped into the sleek vehicle the Sterling family had pre-arranged to take me straight to the orphanage. The director, exactly like in the good old days, immediately pulled me aside to eagerly gossip about the facility. You see, back in the day, right after Dudu's mother gave birth to her, she suffered severe complications and had to undergo an emergency surgery to remove her uterus. Because she couldn't have more kids, her toxic mother-in-law instantly demanded that her son divorce her on the spot. When Dudu's father actually refused, that malicious old hag simply snatched the newborn baby and abandoned her on the cold streets. The director sighed so heavily it hurt. Dudu's parents ended up going through a bitter divorce over it anyway. The father quickly remarried and had a precious son with someone else. But Dudu's mother? She never, ever gave up searching for her little girl. I just nodded slowly, taking it all in. My blood boiled. I turned sharply to the assistant accompanying me. If I recall correctly, abandoning an infant is a severe, downright unforgivable criminal offense. Go straight to the local police station and file a formal report immediately. This time around, I had only brought my most trusted assistant down to Southern City. The director's expression shifted wildly with panic, but ultimately, she didn't even try to stop me. She absolutely despised Dudu's spineless father and that wicked grandmother with a burning passion. But the father had quite a bit of shady local influence, and she had always been completely terrified that calling the cops would bring some disastrous, violent retaliation down upon the vulnerable orphanage. She had been utterly forced to swallow her bitter anger for years. I totally understood her deep-rooted fears. I gently patted her shoulder to comfort her. "Hey, don't sweat it. We're all relocating out of this town soon anyway. You really don't need to worry about offending these local scumbags anymore. And hey, even if we do cross paths with some serious trouble, I'll just have my powerful parents step in and crush them." I stood up confidently. "Now, where's Dudu? I really want to see her." Hearing that her favorite big brother had finally returned, Dudu was excitedly waiting for me inside one of the playrooms. When I pushed the door open and walked in, she was looking up innocently at the woman sitting right next to her. "Sister, is Caspian really your husband?" Seraphina let out this soft, sickeningly sweet laugh. Just as she opened her mouth to answer the poor kid, I had pushed the door wide open. The absolute split second I saw that woman's face, my body reacted on pure instinct. I subconsciously took a massive, defensive step backward. The director, completely oblivious to the suffocating tension in the room, pointed gratefully right at Seraphina. "Oh, Caspian, thanks to your lovely wife here, Our little orphanage actually managed to establish itself safely in Southern City, and thanks to her endless generosity, Dudu was finally able to reunite with her birth mother. I forced this incredibly stiff, unnatural smile onto my face and instantly shot that down. I have absolutely zero relationship with this woman. She is definitely not my wife. The director let out a loud, dramatic gasp of pure, unadulterated shock. For all these long years, she had genuinely, truly believed Seraphina was my legally wedded spouse. Well, it turned out she had been dead wrong. Acting like she was entirely invisible, I completely ignored Seraphina's pathetic existence. I just smiled warmly and waved at Dudu. "Come here, kiddo, big brother's gonna take you outside to play." Yet, Seraphina shamelessly trailed right behind my heels like a lost dog. I really didn't want to lose my damn temper and scream in front of a sweet little kid, so I violently gritted my teeth and forced myself to endure her presence. Seraphina acted as if she was entirely immune to my intense, glaring repulsion, eagerly trying to claim all the credit. "You know, Dudu's mother is actually a minor supplier for my company. I heard through the grapevine she was desperately looking for her son. Well, daughter. So I graciously stepped in to help her out. I kept my expression perfectly, brutally stone cold. Without a single word, I pulled out my phone and instantly wired $10,000 straight to her account. Thank you for helping Dudu find her mother. Consider this your generous compensation fee. We're even." Seraphina's arrogant face instantly drained of all its color, turning ghost white. In the miserable past, I was the pathetic one begging her for mere scraps just to afford basic, everyday necessities. But in just a few short, glorious days, the entire power dynamic had completely flipped upside down. Now, I was the one tossing cash at her face, dismissing her like some cheap servant. She gripped her fancy phone so tightly her knuckles turned white, a violent surge of dark, obsessive frustration rapidly brewing in her chest. By then, we had reached the quiet, deserted backyard of the orphanage. Seraphina, completely snapping and entirely out of patience, suddenly pulled out a pre-prepared cloth soaked in heavy chloroform. Before I could even react, she swiftly clamped it hard over my nose. In an absolute flash, my vision went completely black, and both Dudu and I totally lost consciousness. Breathing heavily, Seraphina quickly darted her wild eyes around to check her surroundings. Under the cover of pitch-black darkness, she violently dragged me toward a getaway car idling in the back alley. Since she couldn't flee the country just yet, she was hauling me to a secret, pre-prepped basement. In this lifetime, he will be permanently chained to me, she thought. Meanwhile, back at the luxurious Bai family estate, Isolde was frantically tearing through her massive walk-in closet, tossing out dress after dress. "Mom, does this one look good on me?" Mrs. Bai let out a massive yawn, waving her hand dismissively. "They all look fabulous, sweetie." When her daughter had first asked for fashion advice, she was genuinely shook. Isolde had never cared about clothes before. She usually just grabbed whatever corporate suit was closest to the door. Who would have thought the ruthless, ice-cold CEO would pull an all-nighter trying on outfits just to impress her fiancé? Mrs. Bai yawned again, slowly getting up. "Pick one yourself, honey. I can't stay up anymore. I'm going to sleep." Isolde frantically grabbed her mother's sleeve, desperate. "Never mind the clothes. Mom, please teach me how to cook. I'm going to make him a home-cooked meal tomorrow." Isolde naturally wanted to show off her domestic skills, but being raised in the absolute lap of luxury, the girl barely knew how to boil water. Mrs. Bai looked her daughter up and down, confirming this was indeed her flesh and blood, and aggressively facepalmed. "What on earth makes you think I know how to cook?" Isolde awkwardly let go of her sleeve. In her blind panic, she had completely forgotten that her mother was also a pampered aristocratic heiress, but she also refused to wake up their private chefs in the dead of night for a cooking lesson. Mrs. Bai covered her mouth, chuckling softly. "I'll go wake your father up. He knows his way around a kitchen. Back in the day, he won my heart entirely through his culinary skills." Isolde's eyes instantly lit up with pure joy. Midnight. Isolde attempts her very first stir-fry. She added way too much salt. Total failure. 2 a.m. Isolde pulls a sponge cake out of the oven, completely incinerated into absolute charcoal. 3 a.m. Isolde enthusiastically lifts the lid of a simmering pot, totally ready to add the final ingredients, exactly as her father instructed, when a harsh, blaring ringtone suddenly shatters the domestic peace. She snatched up the phone, her voice instantly dropping to absolute zero. This better be a matter of life and death. Her assistant braced himself and delivered the terrifying news. Young Master Caspian has gone missing. The very second those horrible words registered, Isolde marched straight toward the door, still wearing her silly ruffled apron. I am flying to Southern City right this second. Hack into all the surveillance cameras along the route and send the live feed straight to my tablet. I'll review it on the plane. Her father frantically waved a spatula from the kitchen, yelling after her. Where are you going? The porridge is burning. Mrs. Bai yawned as she casually walked downstairs. Don't bother asking, honey. Our daughter is off to rescue her man. Back in the day, Caspian going missing was one thing, but now that he was officially acknowledged as a sterling, who on earth had the suicidal courage to actually kidnap him? Southern City. By the time Isolde stepped off her private jet, her elite team had already sent my exact GPS coordinates straight to her phone. Even though Seraphina had used the cover of night to completely blindside and abduct me, and the street cameras were slightly blurry, the absolute second I was taken, the entire Sterling intelligence network completely tore apart every single move Seraphina had made. I was violently locked inside a cold, underground basement beneath an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. 3 years ago, the exact moment Seraphina discovered my true identity, she had ruthlessly prepared this Plan B dungeon, just in case she couldn't successfully smuggle me out of the country. When Isolde finally arrived at the chaotic scene, the entire area was already heavily surrounded by armed police. Seraphina was pinned hard to the dirt by officers, and I was being held incredibly tightly in my mother's warm arms as she softly, tearfully comforted me. Isolde let out a massive, shaky sigh of relief. Only then did the fierce CEO realize she was still wearing that stupid, frilly cooking apron. Blushing scarlet with embarrassment, she quickly ripped it off and sneakily tossed it into a nearby trash can. When no one was looking, she hurried over. Auntie, is Caspian all right? Mrs. Sterling's eyes were slightly red from crying. She whispered a few more soothing words to me, then suddenly spun around and marched straight toward Seraphina like an absolute demon. Smack! She delivered a vicious, full-force slap right across Seraphina's face, the sound echoing through the night. The fact that I didn't completely annihilate you for what you did to my son before was already my ultimate mercy, and you actually had the sheer, suicidal audacity to crawl back here and touch him? Still burning with fury, Mrs. Sterling brutally kicked Seraphina hard in the shin, her beautiful face utterly dark with terrifying aristocratic wrath. Take this trash away. By dawn tomorrow, I want to hear her final sentencing results. I watched the whole scene in stunned silence. This was the very first time I had ever seen my usually impossibly elegant mother explode with such violent rage. And she did it all for me. A sour, deeply overwhelming wave of emotion completely washed over my heart, and my eyes couldn't help but well up with hot tears. When I first met my biological parents, they were so polite, humble, and restrained that I briefly feared they didn't actually love me all that much. But looking at them right now, I knew just how completely wrong I was. My mother, who valued her immaculate public appearance above absolutely everything else, had rushed out into the night to find me without even pinning up her messy hair. And my father, in his absolute blind panic, was actually wearing 2 completely different shoes. Fighting back my heavy tears, I choked out, Mom, Dad, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling thought I was feeling deeply traumatized and instantly crowded around me, wrapping me safely in a warm cocoon of absolute comfort. Isolde smiled softly. She couldn't bear to intrude on this beautiful, long, overdue family reunion. She quietly stepped back into the cold shadows and quickly sent a dark text to her assistant. Bring Lysander, along with our newly developed biomaterials, straight to the underground lab. By the time the morning sun was just about to rise, my exhausted parents finally managed to coax me to sleep. The second my eyes closed, they immediately left to ruthlessly deal with Seraphina and seek brutal justice for me. Isolde stood silently outside my bedroom door, patiently waiting for them. As soon as she saw their dark silhouettes, she quickly caught up. Uncle, Auntie, a simple kidnapping charge will only lock that woman up for a few pathetic years. Why not let me solve the problem permanently? Isolde then led them straight to a temporarily commandeered, high-tech laboratory. This is the absolute latest biomaterial, developed by our corporation. Using a highly specialized medical adhesive, it bonds absolutely flawlessly with human skin, allowing for completely undetectable plastic surgery, with extremely minimal physical trauma. Lysander was currently strapped tightly and securely to a cold operating table. Isolde slowly hooked her lips into a terrifyingly predatory smile. I have already consulted our eager little volunteer right here. He is more than willing to be the very first human test subject for our revolutionary product." Lysander squeezed his eyes shut in absolute, paralyzing terror. He had no earthly idea what horrifying, twisted procedure was about to happen to him. But over the past few grueling days, he had reached a demonic blood pact with Isolde. He would use these experimental biomaterials to surgically alter his own face to look exactly like mine, and then return right back to Seraphina's side. Isolde gave a slight, cold nod, and the elite surgical team instantly went to work. Lysander suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream of pure, unadulterated agony. "Wait! Stop! You haven't given me anesthesia yet." His desperate, pathetic cries were completely swallowed up by the buzzing sound of sharp surgical tools. Mrs. Sterling elegantly raised a beautiful folding fan to cover the lower half of her amused face. Over the past 3 agonizing years, purely to entertain Seraphina, Lysander had maliciously invented countless psychotic methods to brutally torture me. Ending up strapped to this terrifying table today was simply his long-overdue karmic retribution. Everyone present in that room was highly intelligent. Mrs. Sterling only needed to watch the gruesome scene for a few short minutes to fully grasp Isolde's twisted master plan. She nodded in dark approval. "Do whatever you need to do, dear. I'll make sure Seraphina stays locked up in a dark cell for a few more days, just to properly vent my remaining anger." With that, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling calmly turned and walked out of the bloody lab. Lysander wailed and thrashed in excruciating, mind-numbing pain for hours, until the horrific, nightmarish surgery was finally complete. When he finally looked into the mirror and saw a bruised face utterly identical to mine, he honestly couldn't tell if he was feeling highly toxic jealousy or overwhelming joy that he could finally marry Seraphina. But he quickly learned that successfully becoming me required a brutal phase too. Isolde specifically brought in a shady tattoo artist to aggressively carve an identical butterfly birthmark onto his lower back. Completely traumatized by the endless pain, he begged pathetically, "Please, God, please, can I at least have some anesthesia for this?" Isolde's eyes were as dead and cold as a morgue. "He who endures the absolute most bitter of hardships shall inevitably rise above the rest. If you truly want to marry into the Liu family and seize all their massive wealth, naturally, you must endure a little suffering." She sat elegantly on the plush sofa outside the operating room, calmly sipping a hot cup of black coffee to stay awake. What she very strategically forgot to tell Lysander was that while the biomaterial allowed for completely flawless face swapping with minimal surgical cuts, it harbored one catastrophic, highly fatal flaw. If the synthetic material wasn't medically replaced on a strictly regulated schedule, the real human skin trapped underneath would aggressively begin to necrotize and rot away entirely. The R&D lab had tried absolutely everything, but they simply couldn't solve this horrific, flesh-eating defect. So, the terrifying project had been securely shelved for ages. But now that it was back online, Lysander would be its very first and ultimately final human test subject. Soon enough, Lysander shakily walked out of the bloody operating room. Isolde inspected his brand new face highly critically, then took another slow sip of her coffee. Much more pleasing to the eye, but still, just a cheap, pathetic imitation. Trying to flawlessly copy a true masterpiece is always so dreadfully boring. When Seraphina is finally released, you will execute exactly what I told you to do. Understand? Lysander kept his bruised head deeply bowed, meekly agreeing just like a beaten, obedient dog. After barely surviving these past few torturous days locked up with her, he finally, deeply realized that Isolde was a terrifying woman whose very bones were forged from absolute, unbreakable ice. No matter how hard he tried to flirt or play the pathetic victim, he couldn't spark a single microscopic ounce of interest in her. One wrong step, and she would absolutely grind him into dust. But hey, his ultimate goal was never to melt her icy heart anyway. Lysander's endgame had always been the exact same: to legally and rightfully inherit the Liu family's vast empire by marrying Seraphina. 3 days later, Seraphina was finally released from police custody. Lysander stood outside the station, holding an umbrella in the pouring rain, just waiting for her. Wearing my exact face and perfectly stealing my mannerisms, he spoke with a painfully soft tone. I begged my parents for a long time to finally convince them to drop the charges against you." Seraphina just stared at that deeply familiar, beloved face in front of her. Overcome with emotion, she couldn't stop herself from lunging forward and crashing her lips against his. "Caspian, I knew it. I knew you still loved me." Lysander passionately kissed her back, thinking to himself, wow, wearing Caspian's face really is a total cheat code. Even for a simple kiss, Seraphina was acting so impossibly gentle, so completely devoted. As the heat of the moment escalated, her trembling hands instinctively reached down for his belt. This time, Seraphina absolutely refused to hold back. She grabbed his hand and dragged him straight to the nearest high-end luxury hotel. Outside, the rain poured relentlessly, but inside that room, it was an absolute hurricane of passion. Right in the middle of it all, Seraphina repeatedly traced the butterfly birthmark tattooed on his lower back. And then, just two simple, breathless words from her. "Caspian, please." Those words were more than enough to snap the lust-drunk Lysander right back to cold reality. He bit his lip. Even though his dark heart was absolutely boiling with toxic resentment toward me, on the surface, he smoothly added fuel to the burning fire, whispering, "Ruya." After the storm finally subsided, Lysander put his clothes back on and struck while the iron was hot. I managed to sneak my identification card out. "Let's go get our marriage certificate right now." Before I left, it was because I genuinely thought you just didn't love me anymore. But the moment I saw you chase me all the way to Southern City, my heart just completely melted. For the past 3 days, I haven't been able to sleep for even a second. I was just thinking about you. I finally realized I still love you. I can't let you go. Lysander gently wrapped his arms around her neck. "Ruya, let's get married." Even though she had just spent 3 miserable, agonizing days locked in a cold jail cell, she actually viewed it as a total blessing in disguise. After all, it had finally brought her true love back to her. Once they were completely done, Seraphina drove Lysander straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. The staff there took one single look at his face and instinctively bowed, addressing him as young Master Caspian. After all the legal paperwork was stamped and finalized, Lysander tightly gripped the 2 red marriage booklets in his trembling hands. Seraphina eagerly reached out, wanting to take a quick look, but Lysander instantly clutched them protectively to his chest. "You know, divorcing requires a marriage certificate. So, I'm going to rip these to absolute shreds right now. We are never, ever getting divorced again." In reality, those marriage certificates officially had Lysander and Seraphina clearly printed right on them. Lysander absolutely could not risk letting her see that glaring truth, so he pulled this ridiculously dramatic excuse straight out of thin air. And completely blinded by love, Seraphina was absolutely overjoyed by his romantic gesture. She playfully snatched the booklets right out of his hands and tore them into tiny pieces of confetti, tossing them straight into the nearest trash can. She snuggled so blissfully into Lysander's warm embrace. "Caspian, we are going to be together for the rest of our entire lives. You can never, ever leave me again." Shortly after they drove away, Isolde, who had been quietly parked right across the street this entire time, finally rolled down her heavily tinted window. Her loyal assistant handed her a ringing phone from the front seat. "Miss, it's a call from young Master Caspian." Isolde pinched the bridge of her nose, trying to relieve her deep, exhausted fatigue. But the exact second she answered that phone, her tone instantly switched to her signature, gentle sweetness. "Caspian, what's wrong? Do you need me to do something for you?" I laughed softly through the phone receiver. "I heard from my parents that you stayed up all night, frantically coordinating my rescue," I thought. "I really should give you something in return. You definitely don't lack money, so how about I personally cook a warm meal just for you?" Isolde subtly clenched her trembling fists, trying her absolute hardest to keep her emotional voice calm and composed. That sounds absolutely wonderful." Right after hanging up, she suddenly leaned forward and eagerly asked her assistant, "Tell me, does your husband ever specifically cook meals just for you?" The assistant replied a bit awkwardly, We have a live-in chef at home. He generally never even steps foot in the kitchen." Isolde smirked so incredibly triumphantly. "Well, my fiancé is going to cook for me." But then she paused, quickly correcting herself. "Wait, no. You're right. I can't let him tire himself out. In the future, I should definitely be the one cooking for him." By the time she finally arrived at the orphanage, I had already prepared an entire table completely full of magnificent, mouth-watering dishes. Isolde suddenly remembered her own catastrophic kitchen failure from the other night, and she wisely kept her mouth completely shut about offering to cook anytime soon as everyone sat down to eat. Seeing the perfect opening, my father took the opportunity to finally bring up the heavy subject. "Caspian, what do you really think of Isolde? If you're open to the idea, we should hold an official engagement ceremony very soon." Isolde instantly let out a nervous, delicate cough and quickly excused herself from the dining table. She was absolutely terrified of hearing a painful rejection, yet simultaneously, she was desperate to know my true thoughts. So, she sneakily hid right behind the door to eavesdrop. I calmly stood up and casually strolled outside. If Isolde has no objections, we can go ahead and get engaged first. During my past few days in Southern City, Isolde had practically glued herself to my side. No matter what I wanted to do, she was simply always right there to accompany me. She never once uttered the word no. And I was painfully aware that behind my back, Isolde was ruthlessly orchestrating a grand, brutal scheme to utterly destroy Seraphina and Lysander. A fiercely loyal fiancée like her, she was absolutely worth considering. I suddenly pulled the door wide open, instantly locking eyes with an incredibly flustered Isolde, who had just been caught totally red-handed eavesdropping on us. "Well then, Miss Fiancée, do you agree?" Isolde's ears burned bright, furious red. She coughed softly, trying so desperately to maintain her perfectly elegant facade. Are you truly willing to be engaged to me?" I deliberately teased her with a slight smirk. "There's a probation period, you know. But let me make this absolutely crystal clear today, right in front of my parents. If you ever treat me poorly, I will still pack up my things and leave." Isolde instantly panicked. She lunged forward without hesitation and wrapped her arms so tightly around me. "I won't." "How? How could I ever treat you poorly?" Growing up to this age, her one and only devastating regret in life was that when she saw the adult me for the very first time, she was simply too cowardly to confess her deep love. Back then, they both had their respective partners. She was faithfully waiting for her lost childhood fiancé, and I was patiently waiting for my girlfriend to marry me. Coupled with the massive, gaping disparity in our social status at the time, she ultimately just stood there and watched me drift further and further away. Back then, she was genuinely terrified that a sudden confession would incur the brutal wrath of her parents and the Sterling family, potentially ruining my entire life. But now, those impossible obstacles were completely and utterly obliterated. Over the past 3 years, she had systematically and ruthlessly taken over her family's entire syndicate. She finally possessed the absolute, undeniable power to protect me. Staring into my eyes, Isolde made a solemn, deadly serious vow. "I will deeply love you for the rest of my entire life. If I ever dare to break this sacred oath, I swear I shall lose every single thing I own." I just gave a soft, gentle, Our grand engagement ceremony was officially scheduled to take place at a century-old, hyper-exclusive venue right in the heart of the capital. Because time was incredibly tight, I had to frantically help the director pack up all the orphanage belongings well in advance. My master plan was to first settle the innocent children into a massive, gorgeous courtyard estate I had just purchased in the capital, and then gradually move the daily equipment they were so accustomed to using. Once everything was perfectly stabilized, I fully intended to use all my vast resources to help them find parents who genuinely, truly loved them. Suddenly, little Dudu ran over and sweetly tugged on my hand. "Big brother, Mommy said she wants to thank you and buy you a nice dinner." The very first day I had arrived at the orphanage, Dudu's mother couldn't make it due to a sudden, unexpected emergency. Afterward, I just got violently swept up in a massive tidal wave of chaotic events, and I never actually got the chance to meet her face to face. I looked down at Dudu's beaming, purely joyful face, and I felt so genuinely happy for her. In the painful past, I had always bitterly assumed that abandoned children were tossed away because their parents simply didn't love them enough. But the crazy events of late made me finally realize that true parental love doesn't fade, not even across the vast chasm of time. I silently told my younger self, "Mom and Dad didn't throw you away. To find you, they literally sacrificed half their lives." I warmly held Dudu's tiny hand and was just about to leave. Right at that exact moment, the heavy orphanage doors were pushed wide open. Seraphina walked in, smugly leading Lysander by the hand, acting as if she were the absolute most considerate partner in the entire world. "I know you couldn't bear to part with the orphanage. I can happily stay with you here in Southern City for a while, just before we go back to the capital to see your parents." Lysander forced a horrifically strained, awkward smile. Inside, he absolutely loathed even stepping a single foot into this rundown dump of an orphanage. He also had absolutely zero clue who my actual parents even were. But, just to keep up this twisted charade with Seraphina, he had to violently swallow his toxic resentment and just play along. Seraphina confidently navigated the dusty halls and brought him straight to the director's office. Terrified of completely blowing his cover, Lysander didn't dare to speak too much. He suddenly feigned a dizzy spell and collapsed so dramatically right into Seraphina's arms. "Ruya, we can visit the orphanage anytime, but my chest hurts so badly right now. Please, take me to the hospital, okay?" The director just stared in absolute, stunned bewilderment at this strange man who looked exactly like me. I had already briefly summarized my hellish, nightmarish experiences over the past few years to her. She now fully, completely knew that Seraphina wasn't my loving wife. She was my absolute worst enemy. The only reason she had even let Seraphina through those gates just now was because she saw a guy completely identical to me, and mistakenly assumed that I had finally returned. Hearing this pathetic knockoff whining about chest pains, the director practically grabbed a broom to chase them out. "Hurry up and take him to the hospital. Stop polluting my air," he snapped. Seraphina mistakenly assumed the director was just holding a grudge over how terribly she'd treated me in the past. Flashing an apologetic smile, she said, "I'll take Caspian to the doctor first. I'll formally come back to apologize another day." She rushed Lysander to the most prestigious private hospital in the city, throwing wads of cash around to get the top specialists on his case. But the doctors couldn't find a single thing wrong with his heart, so they ordered a full blood panel just to be safe. Since Seraphina was actively trying to get pregnant, she figured she might as well get her own blood work done, too. Right after picking up the lab results, her phone buzzed with an incredibly urgent, high-stakes business call. She softly patted Lysander's arm. "I need to take this. Go inside and see what the doctor says." Playing the part perfectly, Lysander gave an obedient nod, pushed the door open, and walked into the consultation room. The doctor scanned the reports. "Sir, based on these hormone levels, I strongly suspect your wife is pregnant. I highly recommend scheduling a full ultrasound to confirm." The joy hit Lysander like a lightning bolt. He gasped in pure ecstasy. "I'm going to be a dad." He was absolutely desperate to sprint outside and scream the good news to Seraphina. But the second his hand touched the doorknob, a terrifying realization crashed over him. He had only been impersonating me and sleeping with her for a very short amount of time. It was medically impossible for a pregnancy to show up on a blood test this fast. That meant this kid could only have been conceived while I was being tortured at the Lou estate. But wait, he panicked. During that entire time, because Seraphina had previously suffered a miscarriage which she blamed on me, she had completely cut off all physical intimacy with me. It was literally impossible for the child to be his. If Seraphina found out how far along the pregnancy actually was, she'd instantly realize he was a fraud. In a split second, Lysander made a diabolical choice to hide the news. He decided to wait a few weeks, then just bribe a doctor to forge a fake ultrasound report with a completely made-up conception date. He quickly stuffed the blood work report deep into his bag, pushed the door open, and threw himself into Seraphina's arms. The doctor said, "I'm perfectly fine." He lied smoothly. "Let's go home. I want to do it again." Over the next 3 months, Lysander secretly communicated with Isolde every single day using burner phones. Under her expert guidance, he mastered highly sophisticated methods for embezzling assets and making offshore transfers. There was just one catch. Since the identity he was using officially belonged to me, whenever Seraphina legally gifted him properties or shares, the signature on the dotted line had to be my name. But Isolde assured him not to worry, she had already bribed an elite team of lawyers. She claimed that all the assets were secretly being routed straight to Lysander's actual ID, and that using my name on the signature line was just a necessary smokescreen. She even had her assistant deliver a ridiculously complex proxy agreement for Lysander to sign with his real name. Unable to wrap his head around the dense legal jargon, Lysander hired a third-party lawyer to review it for him. The lawyer confidently confirmed, "This proxy agreement legally authorizes you, Lysander, to use the alias Caspian to sign any contract." So, even though the signature reads Caspian, the law officially recognizes that every single asset you obtain belongs 100% to you, Lysander. Armed with this ironclad legal guarantee, Lysander completely let his guard down. He masterfully manipulated Seraphina into signing over one transfer agreement after another. At the same time, he was leaking her insider corporate data right to Isolde, allowing her syndicate to launch devastating sniper attacks on Seraphina's business partnerships. While Seraphina was drowning in corporate crises, desperately mortgaging her core assets just to stay afloat, Lysander followed Isolde's exact instructions. He swooped in and bought out those mortgaged assets using my name. In the blink of an eye, he completely hollowed out the entire Liu family empire. This relentless barrage of catastrophic business failures absolutely tanked Seraphina's mood. She was definitely no longer in that sickly sweet honeymoon phase she had right after marrying Caspian. She would often pull her hair in extreme frustration, glaring at Lysander and muttering bitterly, "If only you were still locked up atoning. Things were so much easier then." Even in bed, she dropped all her previous gentleness, treating Lysander so roughly it left him in actual physical pain. By now, Seraphina's pregnancy had reached the 4-month mark, and her stomach was visibly starting to show. Yet, she genuinely believed she was just gaining stress weight and started obsessing over strict diets. Lysander, of course, completely ignored her complaints. But the very next day, Seraphina ordered their private chef to prepare an entirely vegetarian, low-calorie spread. Lysander's face turned completely icy. He was now the absolute master holding the financial reins of the household. He didn't need to grovel or cater to Seraphina's toxic moods anymore. How the hell could a diet like this properly nourish his unborn heir? Lysander violently slammed his chopsticks onto the table. "You are pregnant. I need to build up my strength, too, and you dare to feed me this literal rabbit food?" Seraphina exploded in rage, screaming right back at him. "Then what the hell do you want to eat? If it weren't for the fact that you are a sterling, why do you think my overseas operations are suddenly being relentlessly targeted and crushed by everyone?" But as the words left her mouth, her brain suddenly buffered. She finally processed what Lysander had just screamed. Her voice trembled uncontrollably. You said I'm pregnant?" Lysander tilted his chin up with pure arrogance. "I don't care about your business failures, but right now, you are carrying my child. You need to rein in your temper. Stay home and focus on serving me properly." A tidal wave of pure joy erupted from Seraphina's chest. She ecstatically placed her hand over her own lower abdomen. "Baby, I'm your mommy. Can you hear me?" she cooed. Instantly, she couldn't help but remember the child she had miscarried years ago. A deep surge of guilt washed over her, and her tone drastically softened. "You are the father of this child. Naturally, I'll listen to whatever you say." Lysander smirked triumphantly. He was incredibly glad he had listened to Isolde's strategic advice. Once the baby was born, and the timing was absolutely perfect, he would dramatically reveal his true identity. After all, practically 99% of the Liu family's empire was already legally under his name. When the truth finally came out, Seraphina wouldn't even have the financial leverage to leave him. However, his smug complacency only lasted for about a month. Over the past few days, Seraphina had been coming home later and later. His highly attuned, opportunistic instincts told him something was deeply wrong. He aggressively interrogated her secretary about Seraphina's whereabouts, but the secretary just stammered and dodged his questions. Then came the final straw. He received a highly provocative text message from an anonymous gigolo. "So what if she's carrying your kid? President Liu still doesn't want you. She's out here looking for some real thrills with us." Lysander flew into a psychotic rage, violently smashing every single expensive vase and ornament in the living room. When Seraphina finally strolled in late that night, her neck was prominently decorated with fresh hickeys. Absolutely furious, Lysander marched right up and delivered a stinging slap across her face. "Speak, who have you been playing multiplayer games with?" Seraphina impatiently shoved him away. "If you can't satisfy me, of course I'm going to find someone else who can. Stop being so irrationally dramatic. I'm just playing around with them. I'll still give birth to this child perfectly fine." Caught completely off guard by the shove, Lysander crashed hard onto the floor. The sheer indignity of it caused the fury to erupt in his brain like a volcano. "You actually dared to push me? Let me remind you, I am the one calling the shots in the Liu family now." Seraphina just gave a dismissive, patronizing hum. She sat elegantly amidst the shattered ruins of her living room and beckoned to him like she was calling a stray dog. "Come here." For his sake, she had decided to permanently relocate back to their home country. Her overseas empire was collapsing anyway, and with the relentless attacks, she figured she might as well pivot back to domestic markets. Besides, the Sterling family possessed absolute god-tier wealth and power. It was only natural that they would help their precious son and daughter-in-law rebuild their empire. Once she successfully delivered the baby, she planned to take both of them to the capital for a grand, emotional family reunion. But before all of that, Seraphina firmly decided she needed to teach her husband, who she still fully believed was me, a harsh lesson. In her eyes, I had been far too disobedient lately, even having the sheer audacity to question her private affairs. She pinched Lysander's chin tightly. "You blame me for going out to find other men? Why don't you reflect on your own pathetic performance lately? My business is failing, and I've been incredibly stressed. But I obviously can't physically abuse you anymore, so naturally, I need to find a few toys to vent my frustrations on. What? Are you trying to stop me? Are you practically begging me to treat you exactly like I did during your atonement years? Lysander scoffed mentally. He was the master of the Lu family now. Why on earth did he need to cater to Seraphina's moods? He glared down at her from a position of absolute superiority. Don't you forget that the vast majority of your assets have already been transferred under my name. You are practically relying on me to feed you right now. Seraphina hooked her lips into a smile that was completely unreadable. Oh, is that what you truly think? Lysander was practically glowing with smug arrogance. As long as you obediently listen to me, I will graciously allow you to keep playing the role of the highly envied CEO Lu. Seraphina slowly cracked her knuckles. When she looked up, her eyes were so terrifyingly cold that she looked at him like he was a complete stranger. She suddenly grabbed Lysander's wrist with a vice-like grip and delivered two brutal, back-to-back slaps right across his face. Considering you are the father of this child, I won't beat you to a pulp today. Go to the confinement room and reflect on your sheer stupidity. I won't send you any food or water. You can come out whenever you finally realize your place. Seraphina's massive strength caused Lysander's face to contort in pure agony. The massive power disparity between them meant Lysander was utterly powerless to break free from her iron grip. He was forcibly dragged down the hall and violently thrown into the damp, lightless confinement room. Seraphina delivered one final, icy glare. Think long and hard about exactly where you went wrong. Clang! The heavy steel door slammed shut. Lysander shivered uncontrollably in the freezing dark. He sprinted to the door and pounded on it desperately. Seraphina, you can't do this to me. I am the father of your child. Seraphina had put so much brutal force into those two slaps that with every single word Lysander screamed, he felt the sickening coppery taste of blood rising in his throat. Yet, he was completely powerless. He could only pound on the door over and over again, transitioning from furiously cursing Seraphina for being shameless to pathetic, sobbing, and begging. But the heavy door remained sealed shut. Suddenly, Lysander felt his face burning and itching intensely. Unable to resist, he scratched his cheek a few frantic times. His fingernails came away filled with strange rubbery debris. A delayed, horrifying realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. His current face was constructed from an experimental biomaterial designed to look exactly like mine. Did Seraphina's brutal slaps just physically dislodge his fake face and permanently disfigure him? A silent, suffocating terror began to spread through his very soul. In the pitch blackness, he finally couldn't hold it in anymore and let out a blood-curdling shriek. Crying hysterically, he slammed his fists against the door. "Let me out!" Standing in the hallway, Seraphina remained completely unmoved. In fact, she felt that locking him up made the house wonderfully peaceful. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he had fundamentally changed. He was no longer submissive, and more importantly, he no longer made her heart race. Irritated, she lit a cigarette and headed upstairs to dig out his bank cards. She planned to forcefully revoke every single asset she had ever gifted him. Caspian just isn't suited to handle money, she justified to herself. He belongs locked in the house, serving me forever. While rummaging through his bags, looking for a specific bank card to pay a vendor, Seraphina's eyes were suddenly glued to a crumpled piece of paper. It was a medical lab report. It was the blood work report from 4 months ago when she took him to the hospital in Southern City. The doctor's notes clearly stated, suspected early pregnancy. Recommend further ultrasound confirmation. But how was that medically possible? When she went in for her official prenatal checkup recently, the doctor confirmed she was exactly 4 months along. Based on that timeline, 4 months ago, she had literally just conceived. How could a standard blood test detect a pregnancy on the exact day of conception unless she had already been pregnant for weeks prior to that hospital visit? The only logical explanation was that Caspian had bribed the doctors to alter the gestational age to deceive her. Yet, ever since she forced me to kneel in the snow to atone, she had never once touched me. If she was pregnant from before the Southern City trip, the baby could only belong to Lysander. This horrifying deduction made Seraphina physically nauseous. Caspian loved me so obsessively, how could he possibly tolerate me carrying another man's child? And to actually help cover it up? She was equally disgusted by the fact that the father of her child was a useless parasite like Lysander. Boiling with murderous rage, Seraphina kicked open the door to the confinement room and delivered a vicious kick straight to Lysander's stomach. "Speak! Why did you help Lysander cover this up? Whose child is actually in my stomach?" Lysander was sweating profusely from the agonizing pain. He wheezed, his voice broken. "Mine. It's my child." Seraphina absolutely refused to believe it. She raised her hand, fully intending to slap him again, but suddenly froze. She noticed a piece of skin peeling off the edge of his jawline. Driven by a morbid impulse, Seraphina grabbed the loose edge and violently ripped it off. Lysander shrieked and convulsed in mind-bending agony. Beneath that synthetic flap of skin was a grotesque, rotting landscape of festering necrotic sores. Seraphina gagged, violently suppressing the urge to vomit. She scrambled for her phone, intending to call a doctor to immediately remove this repulsive, decaying creature from her sight. But right as she unlocked her screen, a message popped up. It was a digital wedding invitation sent by Isolde. "You are cordially invited to attend the wedding of Isolde and Caspian." Seraphina's brain practically detonated. If the person marrying Isolde was Caspian, then who the hell was this rotting monster writhing on her floor? Meanwhile, in the capital, after using Isolde's phone to send the invitation, I gently hooked my lips into a smile. "I always thought you were quite a kind-hearted person, but now I realize, Isolde, you are utterly ruthless." After saying that, I glanced at the proxy authorization agreement lying on the desk. The lawyer Lysander had consulted was, of course, bought and paid for by us. That agreement wasn't authorizing Lysander to act as my proxy. It was the exact opposite. It was an agreement where Lysander officially authorized me to act as his proxy. In simple legal terms, every single time Lysander signed a document using my name, the law recognized it as my signature claiming ownership. And all that nonsense Isolde fed him about using his own ID card to stealthily transfer the assets? A complete lie. He was using my ID card the entire time. In just 3 short months, I manipulated Lysander into meticulously transferring every single asset under Seraphina's name directly into my personal portfolio. Lysander arrogantly thought he had seized the empire. Seraphina arrogantly thought she hadn't lost a single dime. Neither of them realized that the person sleeping next to them had sold them out completely, down to their last penny. As my thoughts swirled, a soft, warm kiss landed on my forehead. Isolde's eyes were slightly red, looking at me with a pitiful puppy dog expression. "Are you going to hate me now?" I gently hooked a finger under her chin, in a remarkably good mood, and coaxed her. "If I didn't love you, I wouldn't be marrying you." Isolde's breath hitched, and she kissed me back with reckless, desperate passion. Back in Southern City, desperate to verify the horrifying truth, Seraphina dragged Lysander out and immediately booked the fastest flight to the capital. The Sterling family would definitely be able to recognize their own flesh and blood. From stepping off the plane to arriving at the Sterling estate, Seraphina's journey was suspiciously smooth. Even when she reached the base of the mountain, absolutely no guards stepped out to stop her. It was only when she drove up the winding mountain road and opened her car door that her entire psyche finally shattered. I gently brushed a fallen leaf from Isolde's hair. We held hands tightly and turned around, our eyes locking directly with Seraphina's. "Caspian!" Seraphina screamed, her voice cracking with pure desperation. That suffocating, agonizing chest pain returned with a vengeance. She stumbled forward, desperately trying to reach me, but I took a polite, aristocratic step backward. "Welcome. Please attend my and Isolde's wedding in 3 days." My voice was warm and refined, absolutely nothing like the pathetic, whining tone of Lysander. Even after she had inflicted so much trauma on me, I didn't seem angry at her. Seraphina's delusional brain instantly applied a heavy romantic filter to the situation. She reached her hand out carefully, begging, "Caspian, please don't marry her. Let me take care of you for the rest of your life, please." I didn't dignify her with a response. Instead, I leaned in and whispered something intimately into Isolde's ear. A beautiful, radiant smile bloomed on Isolde's face. I waved dismissively at Seraphina and turned to Isolde. "I'll head inside and wait for you." Seraphina, unwilling to let me slip away again, tried to sprint past the gates to chase me, but Isolde seamlessly blocked her path. Isolde gave her a look of supreme, unadulterated disdain. "What sheer audacity do you have to show your face to Caspian? For the sake of that garbage in your car, Lysander, you tortured Caspian relentlessly. What makes you think that simply not punishing Lysander is enough to earn Caspian's forgiveness?" Seraphina just stood there, completely frozen. In her deeply warped mind, she actually thought Isolde made a brilliant point. "She is right," she told herself. The only reason things went straight south between us was completely because of Lysander. It had absolutely nothing to do with her. If it were not for that guy existing, she and I would have been living our happily ever after. She completely convinced herself that I was still madly in love with her. In her twisted reality, I was just so devastated that I was marrying someone else purely to make her jealous. Having reached this psychotic little epiphany, she made her ultimate decision. She screamed at my retreating back, "Wait for me. I promise I will definitely make you satisfied. The day you finally forgive me, I will come back and win your heart all over again." With that unhinged declaration, she jumped into her car and sped down the mountain. Isolde took a few quick steps to catch up and slipped her warm hand into mine. "Is it fun playing them both like you are just teasing a couple of stray dogs?" she asked. My eyes were completely calm and tranquil. Calculating human nature is always entertaining. Just like the things you said when we first met, perfectly manipulating me into giving us a shot. Or how you deliberately dismissed the perimeter guards before I saw you, just so Seraphina could smoothly sneak into the estate and test my reaction to her. Those things are all highly entertaining too, are they not? As the words left my mouth, Isolde's face went totally rigid with panic. I let out a soft, relaxed laugh. I am just joking. Who does not try to figure out their partner's mind when they are falling in love? But if you ask me what is truly interesting, I think the absolute best thing in the world is having the total freedom to do what I love, rather than being imprisoned in a house, just staring at a woman. Isolde knew exactly what I was implying. We had a very long future ahead of us. Her promise to me meant far more than just putting an end to the scheming. What I loved, she would learn to love. What my heart desired, she would help me achieve. Her love for me was genuinely a long, premeditated, masterfully executed strategy, and it worked perfectly. After driving down the mountain, Seraphina drained the absolute last of the funds in her bank account to buy a secluded, rundown shack. She dragged Lysander inside and violently threw him straight onto the hard floor. Walking over to the table, she picked up a razor-sharp fruit knife and advanced on him, step by step. "I once lost a child because of her. Now you are going to lose yours. That is what we call absolute fairness." Without a microsecond of hesitation, she swallowed a pregnancy termination pill right in front of him. Lysander screamed in sheer, absolute horror. "You cannot do this. That is my child in your stomach. Besides, all the assets are under my name. If you do this to me, you will never, ever get a single penny back." Seraphina just licked her dry lips, her eyes totally manic. "We are legally married, Lysander. I do not care what is under your name. As long as you are permanently deleted from the server, I am your sole legal heir." Without a shred of mercy, she plunged the crimson-stained blade directly into Lysander's abdomen. She ruthlessly dragged the knife, carving a horrific, gaping gash, refusing to stop until her psychotic rage was finally vented. Lysander shrieked in ungodly agony until his vocal cords literally tore, his voice fading into a pathetic, gurgling whimper. Next, Seraphina locked her terrifying, dead-eyed gaze right onto Lysander's face. "You are not worthy of living with Caspian's face." The bloody blade slashed violently across his cheeks. Systematically and sadistically, Seraphina peeled the biomaterial off his face, piece by piece, exposing the horrific, bloody, necrotizing tissue underneath. The immense pain completely shattered Lysander's sanity, leaving him unable to even form a single coherent word. Finally, she stood up, staring down with cold indifference at the barely recognizable, mangled heap of meat that used to be Lysander. Striking a match, she casually set the entire house ablaze. She calmly changed out of her blood-soaked dress and slipped into a brand new, elegant outfit. She was fully prepared to go back and beg for my forgiveness on her knees. But the very second she stepped outside, the deafening wail of police sirens flooded the entire area. Seraphina pushed the front gate open, only to find herself staring straight down the barrels of dozens of standard-issue police weapons. "We suspect you of intentional homicide. You are under arrest," a voice boomed. Seraphina's mask of icy composure completely shattered into a million pieces. How could they? How could they possibly arrest her right now? She had not even gotten to see me yet. Completely ignoring the literal wall of loaded weapons pointed right at her, her mind was totally consumed by her insane obsession with me. She lunged forward like a rabid animal, desperately trying to break through the heavy police barricade. She just had to see me. Seeing the suspect aggressively resisting arrest, the officers immediately opened fire. A projectile pierced straight through Seraphina's right leg. Screaming in absolute agony, she somehow managed to scramble into her car, slammed her foot on the gas, and burst right through the perimeter. This time, she did not give a damn about the gate guards at the Sterling estate. She violently rammed her car straight through the heavy barricades and sped frantically up the mountain. Isolde and I were just stepping out of the main doors, getting ready to head out for a romantic dinner, when we collided face to face with a blood-drenched, completely unhinged Seraphina. Dragging her shattered, bleeding leg, she crawled across the pristine driveway until she reached my feet, completely collapsing onto her knees. "Caspian, I sent him to the afterlife. I did it all for you. Can you forgive me now? I know you have always loved me." I slowly crouched down and lifted her chin, looking her dead in the eye. "Seraphina, who on earth gave you the wild delusion that I ever loved you? That is honestly the funniest joke I have ever heard. I absolutely, fundamentally do not love you." The manic light in Seraphina's eyes extinguished, piece by piece. Yet, fully trapped in her psychotic denial, she continued to beg, "It is me. I eliminated Lysander just for you, Caspian. You cannot treat me like this." Isolde scoffed coldly right beside me. "Did Caspian ever beg you to do that? Are you truly unaware that taking a life is a severe crime? Just because your own soul is completely twisted and dark, do not assume everyone else is a monster like you." Isolde pulled out her phone and immediately dialed the police captain. "Come up to the estate right now. Make the arrest." Hearing this, Seraphina's face twisted in sheer, absolute terror. Like a dying beast, she suddenly lunged forward, desperately trying to grab me with her filthy, blood-stained hands. Isolde moved with lightning speed, grabbing the crazy woman's wrist and violently twisting it away. She swiftly pulled me back several steps, fiercely and protectively shielding me. Within seconds, the heavily armed police swarmed the driveway and violently dragged a screaming, thrashing Seraphina away for good. Isolde held my hand gently as we walked down the scenic mountain path. "Were you scared just now?" she asked softly. I just shook my head. If a minor scene like that could scare me, how could I ever survive as the true heir to the Sterling family? I just think Seraphina is a pathetic, selfish, completely narrow-minded creature. I really must have been completely blind to have ever fallen for someone like her. Isolde offered a soft, incredibly beautiful smile. "To err is human, Caspian. Even a family as incredibly powerful as the Sterlings made a mistake and lost you, spending years searching in absolute agony. Even someone as blessed and meticulous as me almost made a fatal mistake and missed out on you forever. So, let us just keep looking forward together. Just as you said, in the future, you will definitely be doing the things you truly love." Exactly 3 days later, surrounded by the heartfelt blessings of everyone who actually mattered, I married the beautiful woman I loved. For the rest of my life, there would be absolutely no more sins to atone for.